We are live.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the February 16th work session of the East Hampton Town Board. Carol, would you please read the roll call?
Councilwoman Burke Gonzalez.
Present.
Councilman Leese.
Present.
Councilwoman Overby.
Here.
Councilman Bragman.
Here.
Supervisor Van Squayak.
Present. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today, we'll start with the public portion where any member of the public may address the town board on any topic. We ask that you please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. You'll see the crawler at the top of the screen showing the call-in number throughout the meeting. Today's topics will have Jeannie Carosa from Purchasing Department presenting bids. We have Dr. Georgette Greer-Key will be joining us to discuss the Eastville community as part of our acknowledgement and education on African American people within our community throughout history. We'll have a discussion of the BOEM draft environmental impact statement, Southport Wind Farm, with Brian Frank, who's senior planner, and administrative bureau discussion with attorney Thomas Crouch, followed by non-resident beach permit and driving beach fees, which myself and Carol will introduce. We'll have liaison reports and some resolutions after that. So at this point, again, we welcome the public to call us and let us know what's on their mind. Michael, do we have any callers at this time?
No, we do not, but I'm on LTV's phone just to show everyone it's open and ready. If people call in, I will let you know.
Great. At this point, we'll move on to our topics. And if we get callers, we'll try to fit them in between discussion of our topics. Next up is Jeannie Carosa. Jeannie, you're with us presenting some bids.
Good morning.
Morning, Jeannie.
I have, first of all, we did 3 bids for human services. First was for the supply and delivery of frozen food, and one for groceries and dairy products. The low apparent bidder for all of them were Mavilla Foods from New York, so that's who we'll be awarding to. We have extension of contract for the hazardous household waste collection days, and that's with Radiac Environmental. And I will have notices coming up for Camp Hero pump replacement, food service and kitchenware items for the human services. And then also we're going to have a bid for the town hall window replacement. And that's it.
Any questions for Jeannie? Thank you, Jeannie.
All right, thank you.
At this point, I'd like to introduce Dr. Georgette Greer-Key, who's the Executive Director and Curator of the Eastville Historical Community. Dr. Key, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Good morning. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Good morning. So happy to have you here with us.
Yes, it's an honor to be with you. I did prepare a PowerPoint, but I don't know if we're able to get it on. So I did send it to Ann, but I'm ready to go. Because again, technology is great when it works, and I didn't think I was going to be able to share my screen. So for Black History Month, I wanted to focus on the contributions of African Americans and Indigenous people and the part that we play on the East End. Again, my name is Georgette from Eastville Community Historical Society. Thank you for introducing me, Supervisor. And we have a complex history. You know, I have accounts where we have the diversity of having slavery, but we also have free persons of color and communities that represented that. For instance, I have from the John Lyon Gardner Daybook, where he says Isaac Plateau, a free African-American who worked for John Lyon Gardner, purchased a boat from him in 1805.
Dr. Key, do you want, I can share your PowerPoint. Would you like me to do that? And you can maybe just let me know if you want me to move through the
Okay,
presentation?
okay, I sent it to Ann because okay,
I'll have it all set up for you in one moment.
okay,
Okay, and I think that's on the screen.
okay, yes.
Just
Oh,
let me know
that's
how you want me to proceed.
okay. So, in thinking about just this notice, it makes you think about the nuances of the relationships of communities and also the varied history that we have and share, and the complexities of the political landscape and social economic factors that played into these communities. As you see here, this is just an account that was written down that Isaac Plateau, he was able to purchase a boat from Gardner, and in his notes for $450 and $225 on credit. And this is dated for March 25th, 1805. And we know when slavery ends. So this is well before slavery ended in New York State, which is 1827. So this is an account to show that we had a variety of different communities and relationships within East Hampton and just around the country. Next slide. So what is recorded? A lot of the times we don't see recorded information because we don't have access to a lot of the records, as the last record was in the day book. But thank goodness we have it transcribed. So in thinking about our communities, we have to think about the descriptive. Sometimes we have to re-examine. We have to look at history to make it more inclusive of everyone, not just men, but also women, people of color, and marginalized people. And then we have to renew this history and also get it into our schools, etc. So here is another account that is talking about the relationships and how we see it's recorded. And so how things are recorded, where we look for it, how we find the information, because often there is gaps in our research when it comes to African Americans. So this is another account that we see where we have a reference to enslaved and previously enslaved persons in the town of East Hampton. Next slide, please. So when you think about where all these people were accounted for, here is just a snapshot. This is an image of the churches that were recorded throughout. And a lot of times when we're doing research for looking for people of color, enslaved persons, previously enslaved, and where they could have been, we look for the church records because the church records tell us a lot. And sometimes that's where we see some of the information that we need. So here's an account of many of the churches in Nassau County and also in Suffolk. So of course you see right there, when you see Sag Harbor, that is us. So that is where we come in the picture. And again, we have the honor of being in East Hampton town. So we share that. But just to give you an idea of the people that were going to these churches and how we did have a number of enslaved persons, but also people that were free. And looking at these church rolls show us a robust amount of people that were actually accounted for in the text. Next slide, please. So this is Sarah Louisa Parker. She's really important because she was actually born in East Hampton in 1837. She married John William Parker. He was a minister from Virginia who raised family together in East Hampton in Eastville. And she is one of the persons that we have a tintype of, and her story has carried around, went around. And when you think about East Hampton, we can't forget about Freetown, and we can't forget about persons like Ned the Negro servant and many of the enslaved persons that are documented, but we don't see their presence in the built environment anymore. So tangible, qualified things, accounts that we have for them, but we don't see them. We have no pictures, we have no records, we don't know where they live. We can't go where they live. So having Sarah Louisa Parker, the image of her, and tracing her back to East Hampton was really a great find for us, and we're glad that we have this record. Next slide. So how do we tell the story with these documents? documents and records. And sometimes we have a face, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we have a name, sometimes we don't. So we focus on telling the story at Eastville. This is the St. David AME Zion Church, which was built in 1840. And the importance of this church is, again, the story of a communities coming together, because the church was built by Louis Cuffey, Charles Plateau, and William Prime. And they came from East Hampton, Sag Harbor, and Southampton. So these three communities came together, and this was the church, and people as far as Riverhead would come to this church. And then there's this other very important history that we have, that the first pastor, J.P. Thompson, he was a staunch abolitionist. And people will say, well, why do you need to have an abolitionist, after 1827? Slavery is abolished. Well, we do have accounts that slavery lasted. There were a lot of nuances with slavery, because we see the last account in New York is around 1866. You have to remember Sag Harbor. We have the first customs house. Where would they come in? The lighthouse of the Montauk, and they'd be guided down. So there were rules on the books, such as, oh, you can come in with your enslaved persons, for 60, 90 days, but then you have to leave and come back because of residency. You're taking up residency. So all these nuances we can see. We also know that there are several slaver ships that were found and well after slavery in our ports in Sag Harbor. And, so we think about that. We also celebrate the story of Amistad and Montauk Lighthouse. We do have a monument there, the rock that talks about Amistad and the relations of these different nuances of what slavery was. It wasn't closed and shut, including, the gradual emancipation. These things weren't closed, and they weren't shut. There were different ways that people were able to get around the narrative of slavery and what it meant. And we also tell the story of the whalers, which is really important to us. Fully a third of African Americans were whalers, and the Native Americans were whalers, and they taught the trade to various folks. But also it's important to note that the whalers were whaling well before contact with Europeans. So that's really important. Here you have our cemetery, which is the St. David AME Zion Cemetery. And it was bought to house the parishioners of the church. But when you see the name St. David, where does St. David come from? We believe that it's in honor of David Hempstead, who was, his parents were born on Sylvester Manor, which is the first provisioning plantation, and the first time we see enslaved persons coming to Suffolk County in 1652. And so we look at these various records and these relationships, how people were able to come to Sag Harbor from Shelter Island, from East Hampton, from Southampton, to build this community where they live together, they work together, and they also are interred together at our cemetery. And our tagline is linking three cultures. Then on the bottom, you have the 1920 Sears and Roebuck Catalog Order House. And this house is the house of Rose and Lippman Johnson. And just so many great memories come out of this house, and this is where our headquarters remain. And the fact that it's a Sears and Roebuck Catalog Order House is great. So when you look at this history from slavery coming up to current times, our history is a collective of history and a continuum. It's not just subjugated to one section or the other. And then thinking about the relationship of the indigenous, the native people there, the Shinnecock and Montauk that live together. We can't forget about the project that we worked on with the town, which is the Fowler House, and that very important history and how the community became a collective because of Benson pushing many of the Montaukets out of Montauk. So we have that history there where we have both intermarital relationships, where we have a heritage that's mixed up of mixed heritage, but also a collective of a sense of community. Next slide, please. So here you have us at our cemetery, and here we have our deed. One thing I'd like to point out is on the bottom where you see that is the black and white picture, is the picture of our cemetery, and that is the grave of Rose Johnson, who built the house with her husband. And just seeing all of those roses on her gravesite, the man up on the left pointing to the side, that is a picture that he provided to us. He's a descendant. And he talked about how his grandmother was so beloved and how Heritage House had so many wonderful plantings. Our wisteria is great. Everyone drives by when it's bloom. But she was a gardener too. She liked to have a green thumb and farm, but she was also great to the community. And they poured out the love for her. And as you can see, the love that we see here at the cemetery on her gravesite is really important. But the cemetery was established in 1857, but we see records as early as 1852. There could have been activity there. And the church trustees, Samuel Butler, Elimas Derby, and David Himstead purchased land, and they purchased it from Hannah and Anne Marie Solomon to establish the cemetery. So there's a long history of the cemetery, and this is many of the longtime guardians of Eastville when you see the pictures here, but also looking to how to preserve it. We've done GPR, ground penetrating radar, at the site. And we continue to have stone cleaning kits so that we can have people adopt a grave and help us clean the kits. And I must remark on the remarkable service that we receive from the town services, where they are showing us absolute respect when they come and they maintenance our cemetery. So we're very grateful for the relationship of the town and the fact that our cemetery is kept in wonderful condition. And we really appreciate that. So next slide, please. Okay, I wanted to talk about the whalers, so I couldn't not talk about Pyrrhus Concert and the whalers of the community. So Pyrrhus Concert, many of you know him or have heard of him, but he is a testament to Northern slavery, because a lot of the times when you see enslaved persons, we don't know their last name. We only know their first name. Well, we know his first and his last name. We know that he was on the Manhattan that left out of Sag Harbor, and the Manhattan was basically credited with opening up Japan after the embargo because of the maps that they brought back. And he was on that voyage, and we believe because of his presence and his melodic voice that he was friendly, and it made it just a nice situation for them to actually return shipwrecked sailors that they picked up. So whaling was a big part of Sag Harbor, and it provided for communities and families to provide for themselves handsomely without a lot of the segregation, not saying that there was difference in pay and different things like that, but it provided them a way to live handsomely. And a lot of the widows of the men, they accumulated wealth and were able to buy land before women were able to buy land because of inheritance. So we have a lot of great stories at Eastville. There's no way I could fill up all the time with all of the history. Next slide, please. And then coming up to current times, as you know, probably heard of Sands. It was within the East Hampton town, and also as stewards of our history. Sands is collectively known for Sag Harbor Hills, Azarest, and Nineveh. And this is really important because when you think about these communities, that they were basically born out of wanting to have access to leisure, respite, just summering safely without harm. These developments started to develop, in the 1940s, and it's because of Eastville, where many of the people were building these houses, that they would come and stay in the cottages, like Ivy Cottage, which is on 114. Now they call them B&Bs, but there, was a rooming house or accommodations. So many of the people that came stayed in Eastville, and because of the relationship of Eastville, it was considered to be a safe place to come to Sag Harbor. So up here, you will see the pictures of the 4th of July parade, and how people just live together, how kids feel safe, they're able to run without ridicule. And the fact that this happened during Jim Crow, and before we had laws to protect housing. So the story here is very nuanced in how you deal with the time of the day, but these were professional people who wanted a second home. It wasn't a first home, it was a second home. So we look for the protections. Just recently, we got national and state register, and we're still working on local designation, which would provide the protection that we need. Next slide, please. And just talking about the national significance of all of these stories. Eastville and the residents of the Heritage House and the families, we are in the National Museum, the new museum in Washington. It's the name of the permanent exhibit is the Power of Place. Because if you think about what they were able to accomplish, when they were able to accomplish, and the fact that they still are there, where we have other communities like Hilton Head or Highland Beach or Ottawa. These are places where African Americans would go for respite. Most of them are not in existence anymore. And so the fact that we have Sands right here with us is extremely important. And it also talks about the narrative of the contributions that African Americans made. So you see a picture of the map, but then you also see Azarest was the first, 1947, Sag Harbor Hills, 1950, and then Nineveh Beach, 1952. And then also in the museum, we have residents that have submitted documents and information to the museum that's in the permanent collection. So we have quite an array of residents that have been really great, from Tuskegee men, et cetera, as many of you may know. Next slide.
That's the last one that I have on this presentation.
That's the last one? Okay. I know I didn't have a lot of time allotted, so I didn't want to take up too much time, but just to give you an idea of the varied history that we have, which is a collective, it's ongoing, it's continuing. And so how do we catalog this information? How do we record the information of today? And really, we just want to be able to continue to talk about the history and think about a curriculum that we can get into our local schools. And that's what we're really focusing on. It's been tough because of COVID, but we are still continuing to do virtual programs, and we hope this summer we'll be able to meet in person if people are vaccinated and the virus loads are down. So we are so grateful for East Hampton Town. We're grateful for you giving us the opportunity to present your residents, our residents, to just anyone who will listen, because a lot of the times we think about things being so far. Our history is here. This is place-based history that the residents of our community have contributed to our country.
Dr. Greer-Key, it's really a pleasure to have you here today, as part of Black History Month. But I have to tell you that I feel like 2020 in many ways was Black History Year. It was an opportunity for us as a nation to really reflect on the contributions and the struggles of African Americans in the United States, and how, there's an ongoing effort to reach the goals and the promise of what America is really supposed to be. It's remarkable to me that, as well educated as many people are, that huge parts of our history are untold or undertold. And I think, many Americans didn't know what Juneteenth was. Many Americans didn't know about Tulsa. There are so many episodes throughout our history that people really weren't taught and weren't aware of. And I think it's really important that those stories be told so that we really do understand where we are and where we need to go. Many people don't understand that New York was a slave state, and it wasn't until 1799 that they passed the law of gradual emancipation, whereby anyone born after the 4th of July in 1799 of slave heritage would become free. But it was gradual enough that they were indentured until a certain age. I think it was 1827 when ultimately, as you said earlier, that slavery was abolished in New York. That didn't mean the slaves didn't live here, property of someone from some other state or whatever. So, I really appreciate you being here today. We'd love to have you back again at some future board meeting. We appreciate your kind words about our collaboration and cooperation, working together, the town with Eastville. And you mentioned the Fowler House. That's another example of how we've worked together to preserve that untold history and make sure that there are, structures that reflect the past. And you touched on Freetown. I mean, there's a reason it's called Freetown. And, people of color, whether they be indigenous peoples or African Americans, were to some degree relegated and segregated into those communities. Those are places where they were allowed to live. And, I think, again, part of our history, I know that there are other projects underway to better tell that untold story, the Plain Sight projects, another one, Sylvester, involving Sylvester Manor. And I know David Rattray Star, along with interns, started that project, and that's fascinating. We'd love to hear from them, at some future time too. So again, really a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Well, I appreciate it, Supervisor, and I think you bring up a point. Is the fact that it's like that analogy. Now everybody's shopping on Amazon, but when catalogs were out, people wanted to go to the store because they wanted to have it be tangible, feel it, and touch it. And I think that's the importance of having our buildings in the built environment, so that people see, because the markers, people drive by. So that is one of the things that we've been focusing on, to make sure that we are continue to be in a built environment, seen and heard. And that there is a variety in preservation, and not just looking at purely the historic architectural elements, to consider this a property of significance when it has such a varied cultural history. So I thank you so much, and I absolutely believe in the power of collaboration with you guys, but also I'm advisor to the Plain Sight Project and a cultural partner for Sylvester Manor. So I will definitely tell them that hopefully this won't be a last time of us having this conversation, and, maybe continue this conversation, because the town has so much reach that we don't have, to get the message out, to make sure that our history is known.
Well, we're certainly happy
Can I just ask a question? Can you just talk for a minute or two about the Plain Sight project and how it kind of amplifies your message? I find it very interesting. And
well, the Plain Sight project, again, going back to the towns, I think they have a Zach. They have you guys have a parks or trails committee, and so the trails committee was saying, we have to do something. Every time we're walking through these trails, we see these vacant, these one-off stones, and we need to do something. So it was a collaboration with us and the trails committee, and so we wanted to reinter Ned's stone, which is in a very peculiar place, because it's almost in someone's backyard, but we have the right of way. And so we placed the stone back there, and then the newspaper, David, he says, oh, we have one, we have a record of one enslaved person. And then, of course, all the historians like, no. We have a large amount of enslaved persons here that were living here, working here. And so that's how the project started, because they thought it was so great. But then the students started to learn and really go into the books to see, wow, this is here. It's a reference here. It's a reference here. So they started combing through the collection at the East Hampton Historical Society, at the East Hampton Library, the Pennypacker collection, and various other places. So when people start to uncover it, again, it's documented in a book that's often hid away, hard to get to. So this helps the history get lost. But now that the students are bringing it to the light, there are going to be projects all similar in Southampton and Southport, because communities all over want to learn how to do this. And David Rattray gives walking tours, and he says that people always say they will never walk down Main Street again in the same light, because there was an absolute presence of enslaved persons here. So that was one of the ways that it was brought to light, because of, again, the work of us telling the story and being on the right side of history, by reinterring that stone back in its rightful place.
And I think it's fascinating that, you have well over 300 documented slaves within East Hampton as a result of that project. And what's fascinating to me is that it was actually the cobblers presented the best records for who enslaved people were. The making and selling of shoes, those records reflected a number of enslaved people and gave name to them, which is, it's extraordinary that we do have the number of records that we do. And again, I think enslaved people, that's an undertold story here in town. So bringing light to that as you said, people will never walk down Main Street the same way once they've gone through those tours and seen that presentation. So any other questions or comments from the board?
I just wanted to add one comment if I can on, I don't want to take all the time here, but the sands communities are really totally amazing. The famous, writers, artists, composers, scientists, airmen that lived there and, lent their stories to the history. And I had the great pleasure of working with SANS in their efforts to obtain state recognition and preserve what actually it's not as much the buildings, although they'd like to preserve them in their because they're small, and that reflects sort of the circumstances as the communities evolved, that nobody could get loans and they built small, and a lot of the living was outdoors and shared. So they had to go to the state, not to preserve grand architecture, but to preserve something a little more subtle, the community character. And I worked a bit with Renee and Edwin Simons on that, and had the pleasure of wandering around there and seeing how tight that community is, because there's a lot of living that goes on outside. It's a really, really interesting history and great communities. A lot of fun to be there.
Yeah, it's really one of those communities that are really misunderstood, and a lot of the traditional architectural students who focus on a different vernacular, but mid-century modern houses, which many of them is an architectural vernacular, and places in California and even upstate New York are recognized in an architectural way, but also as a historical reference, because these are mid-century modern houses. That is a vernacular of architecture, and some of the houses have it. So I think it's a combination. When we talk about the significance in history, you're right, it's a combination of the places, the people, and the stories, and the collection of the houses. For instance, if you go to Jamestown is completely rebuilt. If you go to Magnolia Plantation, there are previous enslaved shacks there that, the slave house, but those are architecturally significant because of the people who live there, what they built the materials out of. So I think a lot of the times, even when we think about our own history in East Hampton, we focus on the Dominique, clocks, we focus on the windmills. So sometimes the history is pre-written and preordained for us. So we have to deconstruct that. We have to, deconstruct it, but also look at how to make it more inclusive. And I think that's where we are. And it's not a revisionist history. It's American history. And the more and more we have these conversations discussing how people have been left out, whether it was women or, children, and looking at how we tell those stories, and even how we're cataloging history today. As the supervisor said, this has been a challenging year but I congratulate all of our young generation Zs who've been on the street, and I'm absolutely collecting some of their memorabilia from the march and various things, because this is how we can become that more beloved society, that more beloved community that we're talking about, when we all understand each other and in a respectful way, and not colorblind to our relationships and differences, which should not divide us, but bring us closer together with love.
Well, Dr. Greer-Key, again, thank you so much for coming, and we'll have you back. We'll have you back again soon, and hopefully some more discussion of the importance of everyone in history, and particularly Black Americans and Indigenous peoples within our community. And it doesn't just have to be in February. We're very happy to have you come in March and April or whatever month.
Yes. I just add one quick comment, if you don't mind. I know you mentioned a lot about the AME cemetery. I've actually had the pleasure to walk in that cemetery a lot recently. And as the board knows, cemeteries is something that the town board is taking a special interest in recently, because it is one of those long lost locations of our history and our past, being on the headstones. I think what you did as far as the outreach to not just talk about the architecture, but by the history of it, by going towards the William Pomeroy Foundation for your historical monument was great. It makes everyone passing by know what went on there, the history before the 1917. And then lastly, I know the town board, I brought this to the board last week. I'm going to continue reaching out to look for funding to make sure all our cemeteries can potentially be on the National Historical Register. And in doing that research, such as Sands and the help of Fred Thiel and others to get on the National Historical Register, I'll need to continue that reach to you. So please look forward to my email about that specific cemetery.
Please do, anytime. Thank you so much for your service, guys.
And I just want to add, as a stay tuned moment, the Anti-Bias Task Force is, does a diversity show. We've done 4 or 5 of them at this point. They're all on YouTube if people would like to go and see them. Then we're doing one for Black History Month with Michael Butler. But what I really wanted to say was that we have been reaching out to David Rattray and to Donna Marie Barnes to do a diversity show on In Plain Sight, which I think would be fascinating. And we have 2 great people that want to do the interview with them and put it on Zoom, and then it will be up for people to see and also for people to hear, including education. And so we're looking forward to getting that done. The diversity show is again on YouTube if you want to see it, and we'll add more to it as the Anti-Bias Task Force moves along in this project that's been very, very, very good.
Yes, Michael Butler is a longtime trustee, and Audrey Gaines, so I'm aware of your wonderful work, and thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today. It's been really fascinating and well worth listening to, and I hope you come back again and again.
Anytime. Anything for the supervisor. We've been working together for a long time.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Greer-Key. That's for your kind words, and again for being here. And we'll have you back again soon. And if you want to recommend anyone else to come and present, we're always happy to have that conversation.
Absolutely.
You take care and be well.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
So coming up next, we have a discussion of the BOEM draft environmental impact statement, Southport Wind Farm, and we have Brian Frank with us today, senior planner for East Hampton Town. Brian.
Morning, Mr. Supervisor, town board members. As you know, the BOEM, the Bureau of Energy Management, has released the draft environmental impact statement for the Southport Wind Farm. We're in the middle of the public comment period now. That comment period ends next week. The planning department has reviewed the impact statement as well as the construction and operation plan for the wind farm, and has some suggestions for comments for the town to make to BOEM regarding possible additions to the impact statement. They relate in general to the location of the wind turbine generators, the inter-array cables, the onshore landing cable routes, and the operation and maintenance facilities that may be located in Montauk. As I'm sure you all know by now, the project consists of up to 15 wind turbine generators located in the lease area offshore. The project as proposed consists of 15 turbines that would be located in a grid pattern, each separated north, south, and east, west by 1 nautical mile. That standard distance between them was set up to, in part anyway, to provide a certain level of predictability and reliability for any vessels that may be passing between or among the turbines. In addition to the project as proposed, there are 2 alternatives. Well, there are 3. Every impact statement has a no action alternative, but 2 alternatives in particular that the town board may want to take a little bit of interest in are the vessel transit alternative, which excludes a 4 nautical mile wide transit lane through the middle of the wind farm, and an alternative that was described as a fisheries habitat impact mitigation alternative. Both of these alternatives could reduce the ultimate number and location and adjust the location of the actual wind turbine generators, but the details of what that would, of where they would specifically be located, and how it would affect the ultimate amount of electricity generated by the project doesn't appear to be included in the impact statement. And additional details, we'd encourage the town board to obtain more details through BOEM. It seems that the actual siting of the turbines hasn't been specified yet, at least not in the document. And the document alludes to working with the National Marine Fisheries Service with regard to the specific locations. Reducing the spacing of any turbines could affect the ability of vessels, especially commercial fishing vessels, to navigate safely among the turbines after their construction is completed. And again, anything that affects the location, the number, and the amount of electricity generated by the project should be fleshed out in as much detail as possible. I don't know if I should stop periodically or should I just keep going? And
any questions or comments?
Yeah, I could ask a question on that. This is a concern that I had and I mentioned.
Jeff, we're having trouble with your audio, your microphone.
I don't know. I can speak a little closer. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
Okay. This is an issue that I spoke about with concern, and I just want to make sure I understand you, because it sounds like something I was talking about a couple of weeks ago, and that is that the spacing, the 1 nautical mile spacing within the perimeter of the lease area makes it difficult to protect Cox's Ledge, as I understood it, and that some of the things that you're talking about are what I understood might be the mitigation to get a better protection of Cox's Ledge. In other words, you know, the planned grid pattern may be too big and put too much structure near Cox's Ledge. It sounds like that's what you're saying, and that's what we should look at. Because I had read that to protect Cox's Ledge, they might have to move turbines, and they might even have to reduce the number of turbines.
That's correct. That's the fisheries mitigation alternative. The impact statement discusses the concept of micro-siting to reduce the impact of each of the individual foundations and the scour protection associated with them, to reduce the impact to productive benthic habitats as a result of their location. But there isn't, if it's possible for the impact statement to provide more detail as to what that means, I think it allows all the stakeholders to make a more informed, to have a more informed opinion of the project.
I think it's important to also consider what the long-term impacts are versus intermediate or short-term disruptions for the siting. Cox's Ledge, you know, is in fact an area, it's a large area. Some parts of it have significant habitat, some of it have moderately significant habitat, and some of it has habitat that really is not as productive. And the areas that are most productive are ones that have structure, boulder fields, ledges, and pinnacles of rock. It is in fact the structure that gives, acts like a reef, if you will. And you know what's being considered here is adding more structure in that structure field. So, you know, I think overall understanding what the maybe short-term impacts and whether or not the ecosystems recover quickly is an integral part of understanding whether or not that disruption you know, should be avoided in that area or not. I can screen share with you I believe I can screen share it. Let's see. Yes. So this is a map of the layout. You can see the numbered turbine locations, these circles. The light blue is not complex habitat, as I was discussing, and then the varying colors, potentially complex is the dark blue, and complex habitat, the very dark color. So you can see that some of these proposed grid locations are within, and again, this also shows the cabling between those turbines as well. So, you know, I don't know outside of this lease area whether the habitat is really significantly different and how far you would have to go. I mean, there are certainly advantages to having a grid pattern versus non-grid pattern in terms of mariners knowing, you know, where they might expect to find the next turbine tower in low visibility and to be able to transit between them safely. That's consideration.
I think 70 square miles of the lease area were removed in part to protect Cox's Ledge.
Can I just ask a question?
What was that again? Could you repeat that?
Yes, the impact statement references 70 square miles that was eliminated from the offshore lease area from, I believe it's the Rhode Island and Massachusetts wind energy area, in part to protect Cox's Ledge.
But the issue, as I understand it, is that we have proposed wind turbines that are in a location where there is significant habitat, and that's what we're trying to address. That's a major issue in this, is it not?
Well, yeah, it may be.
Excuse me, Peter, can I just...
I'm sorry, yeah, go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry, I didn't...
Just wanted to get an answer from Brian.
Yeah, sure, of course. I'm sorry about that, Jeff.
Well, all of the, you know, the whole lease area was set up, the location of the lease area was identified to minimize impacts to productive habitats, but there is essential fish habitat and productive habitat throughout that entire outer continental shelf of the North Atlantic.
And one follow-up question. They reduced this leasehold, didn't they? And that is something that's kind of pressuring the pieces of the puzzle by limiting the places where we could move them around. Isn't that correct? You know, are you aware of that, that they subleased out a portion of the original leasehold, which has reduced the perimeter of it?
It has, the area is tightened up, and, you know, so one of the points of discussion was, did the tightening of that limit flexibility as to siting?
Can I ask a question before we get much deeper into this? Can I understand what the bigger picture is? Are we looking to make a recommendation on which alternative we should go forward with? Are we looking to do it tonight? Because I believe tonight's the last virtual hearing, or are we doing, you know, submitting written comments by the 22nd?
Yeah, we have written comment by the 22nd, and then the hearing, there's another hearing, one of 3 that was scheduled tonight at 5 p.m.
This is more about the completeness of the document and any revisions that or additions that stakeholders might want to see in a final environmental impact statement.
So to Brian's point, we're looking to review this and see if there are any additional comments that the town wants to make regarding increasing the scope, if we think it needs to be increased, or any particular areas that aren't covered that we think should be covered. You know, there is another aspect that involves the offshore cabling with an exclusion zone around what would be the FIMP borrow site. I believe it's 7A. The borrow site is 7A. So, you know, that's a comment that we might want to add, that we want to make sure that there's not too much of a restriction so that it doesn't interfere with the FIM projects, dredging of offshore sand. I think that area is right off Hither Hills, again, which might, you know, impact the Hither Hills route. You know, I think it's important for us to ensure that we have that borrow site available. We've experienced extreme erosion so far this winter. We have a lot of the storm season left. We have the bags exposed on the beach. Will be required to rebuild that beach again this season and be completed by May 15th. And I think, that's not sustainable. The longer term is to have the ACOE FIM project bring in over 400,000 cubic yards pumped from those offshore borrow sites. So I think we should add a comment about that to be sure that we're not interfering with that project.
Brian, did you take a look at, I've seen a comment on the visual impact analysis criticizing it somewhat for focusing on the leasehold as a whole rather than the nearest portion of the leasehold to Montauk.
I can mention that as part of my report from some of the commentary that came from the FAC. I believe it came from the same person, Jeff.
Okay, but I'm asking Brian, are you aware of that? And can you take a look at that, Brian?
I am aware of that, yes.
Okay.
I do want to kind of stick with the offshore impacts a little bit. There's a variety of cable installation methods that have been discussed in the impact statement for connecting the inter-array cable between the turbines. The impact statement references the use of a mechanical cutter, a mechanical plow, or a jet plow as possible alternatives to mechanical dredging. And the planning department would encourage the impact statement to identify which of these installation methods might facilitate the most rapid recovery of the bottom habitat, which installation method would provide the least amount of disturbance and encourage the most rapid recovery of the habitat.
I would completely agree with that.
I would too.
With regard to the onshore cable landing, there is reference to possible, reduction in public access during the installation of the cable as it makes the transition from offshore to onshore at the end of Beach Lane. Although the impact statement references that as occurring within the off-season of September to May, additional details about the duration for which public access would be restricted should be provided.
I would ask, does BOEM reflect the requirements that we've put in place regarding public access? Because we have ensured through our agreements that public access isn't impeded. I just want to make sure BOEM's, properly reflecting, what our requirements have been.
Well, that could be one of our comments then in regards to this, to make sure that anything that anything that's within the town's easements and contracts would be the same reflected within the BOEM finalized completed EIS.
Well, that's more a goal. That's not a specific dimension plan. That's just a statement in our documents. It's a statement that they have to keep up.
It's a requirement. It's not.
It's a requirement. What I'm saying is, it's not something drawn on a map that says it's got to be X feet wide. It's just a
I just
statement.
want to make sure that the BOEM, DEIS reflects, that aspect, because I think it's a very important aspect, should be reflected in the document.
Well, duration and notification of, when access to the beach will be limited. If that
to what degree? Because when you say limited, it's, there's going to be free flow of traffic and pedestrians and whatnot through that area. The beach isn't getting closed down.
Well, he didn't say that, Peter. He just said when it's being limited. If I understood you correctly, that you just said, let's get that detail.
I just want to make sure that it properly reflects the facts on the ground. That's all.
Are you going to circulate some comments to us again after this meeting so that we can take a look at them?
Yes, you'll have planning department comments hopefully by the end of the day. A written summary of this. With regard to any cable landing at Hither Hills, the planning department thinks the amount of detail associated with that is greatly lacking. The Hither Hills overland route through Napeek State Park, as probably a lot of you are aware of, there are a lot of small freshwater, groundwater fed wetlands there that don't show up on either the state or the federal wetland maps. And any cable route through Hither Hill State Park, even up through the railroad right of way, should identify the amount of clearing that's required, where the perpendicular access may be necessary for trenching, where the vaults would be located. It's a high groundwater table area. In addition to the extensive freshwater wetlands throughout that area, there is also a high concentration of rare plants listed in the New York State Natural Heritage Program. Many of them are located within the wetlands, but many of them are just located within that habitat along the right-of-way. And the details associated with that, I think, are necessary to really assess the environmental impacts of that alternative.
Board members agree that those comments should be submitted regarding the wetlands and endangered plants, and that more detail is necessary to understand
Yes.
what those potential impacts might be.
Again, as you had already alluded to, Mr. Supervisor, there is reference in the impact statement that Hither Hills Landing may require a buffer from the offshore borrow site. BOEM has indicated they would want a buffer from the offshore borrow site that has been identified as the source of sand for the Montauk feeder beach, and anything that reduced the volume of sand available for beach nourishment in Montauk is certainly an issue of local concern.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of great concern to me personally. Any other board members' comments on that?
No, it's a long-term look at how two major projects can potentially have effect on each other, and this should coordinate appropriately.
Lastly, the wind farm may involve an operation and maintenance facility in Montauk Harbor. And the impact statement makes general references to some of the improvements that would be necessary to facilitate that. But the details are a little bit lacking. There's reference to new initial dredging and maintenance dredging, but no reference to depths. There's a general reference to a footprint of 37,000 square feet, but it's really not depicted anywhere. There are references to possible improvements to the docks and additional slips that may be necessary for the crew transport vessels that would operate out of the O&M facility to the wind farm. And there's also reference to some upland improvements that are probably less significant, office, building, storage facilities. But it is important to understand what changes would be necessary to any property within Montauk Harbor, what improvements would be necessary, if any new shore hardening would be required, and also to make sure that the establishment of an operation and maintenance facility in Montauk doesn't impact or displace the existing commercial fishing operations that go on there, or the pack out resources associated with them.
So in addition to, making comments on that, it's important to state again that, of course, any of those improvements would also have to go through the review of the town through site plan, and that process is a separate process.
And if those details could be identified, if any additional detail could be provided in the impact statement, it should be.
Yeah, understood. Brian, do you have any other comments? I know one of the other points of interest for us is fisheries. And I know David and I have had conversations about the fishing industry and potential impacts on fisheries. And, David is liaison to the Fisheries Advisory Committee. You've had direct conversations and gotten comments from FAC members. And perhaps you could review those with us at this point too.
Sure. The direct outreach to the FAC, which also has had a subcommittee on offshore wind, received four main comments on here. One that primarily was discussing with the shipping lanes, for the shipping lanes and the sizes to maintain the 4 nautical mile distance to provide safe shipping and safe transit for mariners, and specifically looking at all offshore wind and the cumulative effect. I know you heard this from me a couple of weeks ago. The cumulative effect of offshore wind has to be looked at, not in just this one small project, when we start looking at all the potential thousands of turbines that are offshore, particularly in this area and others right now. So the shipping lanes, I think, Brian, you mentioned that. So to maintain that, not increase that, but make sure that they are all within a design at looking all the wind turbine sites. And on to that, the next one is to site the turbines with regularity and a grid pattern. If it's the 1 nautical mile, yes, but that would provide mariners the knowledge base of where the next turbines would be, depending if you are fishing with different types of gear types, long lines compared to others. And that would give mariners a quality of safety. That got discussed a little bit within this also. Again, continue to look at the DIS and the Southport Wind Farm under the lens of the cumulative effects of offshore wind infrastructure. Next, we going on to the final design of a fisheries compensation and mitigation plans to have the developer to continue those designs and directly engage with the Fisheries Advisory Committee to the potential impacts on fishing gear. Stated that the projects develop a financial compensation policy for use when interactions between the fishing industries and the project activities or infrastructure cause undue interference with gear. The FAC wants to make sure that this design is looked at thoroughly, also through from the FACs for commentary before anything is finalized.
So David, does that mean you guys are not taking a position on which alternative? You're still gathering facts?
This is not necessarily taking a position. This is just looking at, as Brian mentioned, the completeness for the draft DEIS. The position in the FAC is primarily from the past was that the copyright compensation mitigation plan is a bedrock to any discussion moving forward, and there hasn't been enough information about that plan forthcoming right now in this draft DEIS to make the FAC members and members I heard from comfortable moving forward. So they want to draw more information out of it right now. I hope that answers that question.
It does. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Next one was the one that Councilman Bragman was bringing up about the visual geographic analysis area. And since particularly some of these wind turbines are going to be potentially larger, maybe less, but larger in height, some of them might be able to be seen from the horizon if they're 836 feet tall and visible eye level. One of the members would like to see that visual impact study go further out, and potentially how would it be seen potentially from Montauk, that by centering the visual geographic analysis on the area, which is 55.4 square miles, South Fork wind lease area as a whole, rather than on the southwest corner of the lease area. So they want to see that analysis comes from a different area, but also widening the look at that. But those are the main comments there. As we've mentioned to the FAC, these comments can and potentially will be included into the town board comments for the BOEM draft DEIS. All comments have to be in by the end of the day. I think it's 5 o'clock on the 22nd of February. There is a public hearing today at 5 o'clock. I will just give the information now and also later, as I have been recently. The meeting tonight is from 5 to 7 p.m. You can register for the virtual public meetings at boem.gov. Follow through to the South Fork Wind Farm Draft DEIS. That will give you the information there. You can also write in and mail an enclosed envelope labeling South Fork COP DEIS, an address to the program manager at the Office of Renewable Energy, Bureau of Ocean and Energy Management, 45600 Woodland Road, Sterling, Virginia, 20166. Comments have to be received or postmarked no later than February 22nd. And those are ways that individuals in the fisheries or anyone else in the general public can also comment on the completeness of this draft DEIS. But those are the commentaries that I've received from members of the Fisheries Advisory Committee on the direct outreach that we've had over the last few days.
Great, Tim.
Can everyone hear me? This is John Wagner.
Hi, John. How are you? So John Wagner's outside counsel for us. John?
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that I've been interacting with Dr. Mary Boatman, who is the NEPA coordinator that's responsible for the DEIS process. And as of today, she told me of a link that I can follow on Monday to electronically file our comments. They must actually be filed no later than 11:59 on Monday the 22nd. I like the idea of getting them in by 5 o'clock. That's even better. But there is an electronic method of filing the comments that is an official channel. And,
Okay, we'll make sure that we coordinate with you to get those comments in via that official channel.
Sure.
Brian, did you have any other comments to make? I didn't want to cut you off. I realized maybe I did.
No, you didn't actually.
Okay, so you were done. Any other questions or comments? Anything else that we feel isn't in the draft EIS that should be in terms of scope or focus? Okay, in that case, we will move on to our next agenda item, which is.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you for joining us, John and Brian, both. Our next topic of discussion is Administrative Bureau, and I believe Thomas Crouch. Thomas, you joining us? And we believe we have Chief Ed Michaels as well, who can, or maybe it's David McMaster presenting. John, do you know?
Supervisor, Thomas is coming into Zoom right now.
Okay, great. Okay, hello, good morning, Thomas, and welcome.
Good morning, or afternoon, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess my name is Thomas Crouch. I work at the town attorney's office. I wanted to talk about the possibility of an administrative adjudication bureau. Our office and the public safety departments have been discussing the creation of an administrative adjudication bureau to expedite the processing of certain enumerated town code violations. Currently, all town code violations are handled through justice court. However, there's no mechanism for the payment of fines by mail or online without appearing. Further, our code enforcement and marine patrol officers are having to use long form tickets, which require them in many cases to come into the office to complete, taking them out of the field. So the town is interested in creating an administrative bureau as a separate entity from the justice court to allow for, among other things, the payment of fines by mail or online. Further, our officers will be able to use short form or H tickets, as we call them, for the enumerated town code violations, which will allow them to stay in the field for their entire shift and presumably allow for increased enforcement. For those wishing to contest a ticket, there will be a separate hearing process before the Administrative Bureau. We've been in touch with the town of Huntington, who put together this program a few years ago, and it seems to be working well for them. Procedurally, to make this happen, the board must first send a letter to Assemblyman Thiel stating its interest in an administrative bureau and requesting that he draft an amendment to General Municipal Law Section 380, which will enable the town to create the bureau. Then after Assemblyman Thiel drafts the enabling legislation, the town will need to approve a home rule message resolution requesting that the state legislature pass the enabling legislation. Then, assuming the legislature passes the bill and the governor signs it into law, the town would need to amend the town code to 1, establish the bureau and provide its operating procedures, and 2, amend the code sections for the enumerated violations that the town would wish to have before the bureau. So the action that we're asking the board to take today is requesting Assemblyman Thiel to draft enabling legislation. As I said before, this is the first step of many to adopt this if the town wishes. Overall, we feel that this bureau would provide an easier and quicker process for the payment of town code violations, would reduce the backlog at Justice Court, and would increase enforcement. I have Ed Michaels from the Marine Patrol and David McMaster from my office here to answer any questions you have about the Bureau and any of the procedural steps that need to be taken.
Thank you, Thomas. I know that having a more streamlined and efficient process, many people who get citations are not likely to appear and want to contest them. They just want to be able to pay those fines and get on with it. We certainly want them to be able to pay those fines and not clog up our court system. Chief Michaels, do you want to make a few comments about what your experience in the field is and whether or not you support this effort?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Supervisor and Town Board. Yes, this is a win-win for everybody, I believe, because as some of you know, we've had this type of mail-in program in the past, and due to the changes in the bail reform and a few other things that happened, it had to be amended and upgraded. But this would give us the best of everything, I think. It gives, as the supervisor just said, it gives people a chance to pay the fine and not come back. It keeps people out of the courtroom in this COVID time, keeps the calendar from getting clogged up, and it gives us more time from our officers in the field. Instead of on a 10-hour shift or a 12-hour shift, instead of having 8 on patrol and 4 doing paperwork, they'll have the whole time out there, which will, of course will give us more enforcement. And I know that's an issue that we've been talking with several of the CACs. More people, more enforcement. I think we can achieve that through this program.
Thank you, Chief. David McMaster, you work with our courts here locally. You have any comments on the administrative bureau and what you see and how that might help us?
Yes, I think another part of it, in addition to clearing the calendar, is that it will allow more time to focus on the cases that remain on the Justice Court calendar that are more complex and give those cases the attention that they deserve. Like the rental registry violations and some of the more complex cases that will remain on Justice Court that kind of suffer at the expense of the cases now that we're looking to move into the Administrative Bureau. So I do agree that it's a win-win, and I don't really see a downside to adopting the program. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, David. Any questions from board members on Administrative Bureau?
I think there's also there's a portion that we're looking at as far as enforcement, more time in the field and making it more streamlined. But there's also a portion of non-taxable revenue that is lost for current procedures that in the end will assist in implementation of this. So there's a lot of benefits to this moving forward. And I know the board's been discussing it, or others, for long before I was on the board. And it's something now that has been, when it's been laid out by Chief and Thomas and David, I'm supportive of trying to move it forward. So I thank you for doing that.
And I'd also just like to say, I think it'll be easier for those who are given the tickets. I mean, we know pre-COVID how many times people would show up in town hall because they didn't know where Justice Court was, and we had to tell them, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's 4 o'clock. Justice Court is closed. You can't pay your ticket," and people were leaving town. And I think that for them to be able to do it online or by mail will just, I think the residents who unfortunately get these tickets will be more satisfied.
So I just have a question about a timeline. So if we can work with Fred Thiel during this legislative period, how fast could we move this along?
Well, that remains to be seen. And, I think the Assemblyman's been very helpful to us in the past. And so I don't think there'll be any issues there. Again, the governor's receiving all sorts of such requests and has a lot of other things on his desk right now as well. So it's hard to say, when that might be signed by the governor. But I think our first step, if everybody's in agreement, I will reach out to the Assemblyman and let him know that we're supportive of this effort and request his assistance. And we'll keep everyone posted as how that progresses. Again, we'll need to also be talking about once home rule is granted under Section 380, then we'll need to go back and identify those sections of code that this would pertain to. There are some some offenses that we wouldn't want to include in administrative bureau and some that we certainly would. I think the minor violations certainly would go into that. And we'll get some assistance from the attorney's office and Chief Michaels in identifying those specific code sections that would be most appropriate to add. And then we'll await, the governor's signature, hopefully.
Great, thank you.
I mean, in a perfect world, this would all be done before the summer season starts.
The world is
We know how perfect the world is right now.
Right. Yeah, that's just it.
We'll do our best to obviously push it forward as quickly as we can. Any other comments, questions before we move on? Okay, thank you so much, Chief Michaels, David Master, Thomas Crouch for joining us. I do think I got a notice that we had a caller on the line. So Michael, in between topics, if we could take a caller if they're on the line there.
Yes, we do have a caller. The last 4 digits are 8764. I'll unmute that now.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Town Board, Mr. Supervisor. This is David Buda. I do have interest in this topic and some familiarity with it, but I have a couple of questions. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but I think that you should have the people who are promoting this identify some of the possible ordinance violation types that would be subject to administrative handling. Obviously, it's the minor ones. Obviously, it's the ones that rarely are contested. But if they could elaborate and identify some of those, it might put some context to this proposal. Plus, on the flip side, even if it's a minor offense that's included in the scope of the Administrative Bureau handling, there will be the occasional not guilty plea. And then the question is, what and how would the Administrative Bureau adjudicate such matters? Who would be the Administrative Bureau? How would they adjudicate any contested matters? Obviously, you're envisioning this to streamline the process for those minor matters where people rarely contest them, and clearly the most obvious example would be parking offenses, which clog up the courts and rarely are involved in a contest. I think that someone should comment now on what they envisioned might be included, and of course, the list of town ordinance offenses that might be included would be determined later and could be adjusted, but I would like to hear what they're thinking.
I can speak to some of the offenses that we've considered. Those would be things like open container violations, driving on the beach without a beach driving permit, certain littering offenses, having a fire on the beach in violation of the town code, things of that nature, among others. I don't want to give an exhaustive list at the moment, but those are the ones that come to mind immediately in my experience as the Justice Court town attorney that are typically on the calendar, in the greatest volume, that I think we would benefit the most from moving those over and allowing people the opportunity to plead guilty by mail. I think Thomas could speak to the structural component that was part of your question.
Sure. So the way the town would have substantial discretion on how we wanted to design the program, but the way Huntington has done it and what we've gotten from them is that there's a director and an administrative law judge that will hear not guilty pleas in much the same manner as it's done through Justice Court, and that there will be a panel of anywhere from 3 to 5 to 7 appellate panel to hear any appeals from that director's decision. That's a lot of that we'll have to flesh out as stuff we want and what we want to include from Huntington, what we may want to try to do a little differently. So our primary focus has been just getting the enabling legislation done, but that's a little bit detailed as far as how the program would work.
So David, as I said earlier, we'll continue to work with enforcement and the attorney's office to identify those sections of code that we would want to include, and we'll certainly have another work session on the topic as we move forward. But at this point, I believe the board was unanimous in our agreement to pursue the home rule legislation.
I don't disagree. I just have one other question. If you could just clarify, parking offenses clearly today are allowed to be handled by mail. Would there be a need to include those or a reason to include those within the scope of the Administrative Bureau?
The short answer is yes. The explanation is a little bit convoluted and relates to a ongoing ethics opinion at the Office of Court Administration. That might be coming to an end. Our ability to adjudicate those parking tickets by mail, or at least our ability to make a revised offer to a person charged with a parking violation by mail might be curtailed in the Justice Court, which is quite, I think, one of the incentives for wanting to move those offenses over to the Administrative Bureau, because the second component of this is reclassifying those offenses as violations, so they're not subject to the same type of oversight that the Justice Court is, and not subject to all the criminal procedure rules that hamstring us in Justice Court. So that's the short answer.
And also, I think one of the two town attorneys mentioned that there is a financial component here. I believe that matters that are adjudicated in Justice Court are split, fines that are received are split with the state, I believe, and I assume that the Administrative Bureau would result in fines that are 100% retained by the town. Is that correct?
I see Ed Michaels is nodding his head yes.
Yes, the town code violations, it'll be ours.
Does that answer all your questions for now?
Well, I guess the question to the attorneys, and maybe they know the answers, or would the town also retain 100% of all fines from town parking offenses and anything and everything that goes through the Administrative Bureau?
That's my understanding, David.
Well, that would be a funding source for the extra staff, and
yeah, it would be, and I think that's another major benefit, as I believe it was Kathy Gonzalez had alluded to earlier, or maybe it was David. I guess it was you, David, Lease, that the non-tax revenue portion is something we should consider. As you know, we get a large influx of people every summer, and we are hosting those people, if you will, and when they violate our rules, they should help offset our quality of life enforcement and just even the amount of extra garbage that we have to collect and dispose of. So it would help balance things out a little bit, I think.
Right. 100% is much better than 50%. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks for calling, David. Be well. Michael, do we have any other callers before we move on?
No, we do not.
Okay, so the next topic is about discussion of non-resident beach parking and driving permits. And we, this past season, did not issue either once the pandemic hit. I think we had something in the low 70s in terms of non-resident permits issued before things shut down. Looking forward, I believe we're approaching a time when we will be able to issue non-resident permits again, but before we give the okay and the go-ahead to do so, I want to make sure that we revise and update our beach parking, our non-resident beach parking and driving permit fees. I know that the village has again raised their rates. They opened their permit purchase on February 1st, I think. And they were sold out of the online within a matter of a couple of days, over 2,000 in a couple of days. And then they were just issuing in person. They didn't want to oversell. Their fee this year is $500. And I think it would be appropriate if we had a commensurate fee, and I wanted to get the board's input on that. Any questions or comments on that? Going once, going twice?
Well, I do have just, is there any indication by the governor's office of when and if they're going to lift the 50% capacity on the beaches?
Every indication is that the governor is relaxing things as we go forward. And as you know, the vaccine is now being distributed.
Mm-hmm.
And I expect that this summer, that will be the case. Now, just because we raise the fees doesn't mean we're actually issuing the permits.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we should put the fees at the appropriate level before we even engage in that. So.
And this is just to be done through resolution and not through
right.
through resolution. Yep.
Yeah, the fees in this case will be adjusted just by resolution. Any comment?
The only comment I have is whether or not we're going to limit the number that we will sell as the village does.
That is something we can decide now, or we can decide before.
We haven't done it in the past. It's not something that happens here in the town. So, I'm just asking the question. I'm not sure I'm for that or against that. So.
Well, I mean, we certainly could issue a limited number to start with and wait for the governor to indicate what beach occupancy might be this year.
I think one of the differences. Sorry.
I just wanted to say that in our case, beach occupancy isn't driven so much by parking availability. We have, almost 74 miles of beach. And on the ocean beaches, there's plenty of room for people to spread out, as we saw, whether they had cars parked or they walked up from somewhere else or got dropped off. We had, very robust beach attendance last year, and people were still able to spread out. We had our beach monitors and lifeguards did a terrific job with that. So I think the lots will fill before the beaches do. So I'm not really so worried about the occupancy levels at this time. And I think the non-tax revenue would be an important factor. I don't know what the total number is right off the top of my head for those permit sales in 2019. But it's, see if I can quick calculation.
Yeah, I just opened up the budget trying to find what was projected for non-resident.
It's typically around 300 and
parking, but it's not under beaches, so I'm trying to find.
Just figure that out. I can tell you
where it is.
Existing cost. What's the existing?
Let's see, 698.
Carol, Jeff's question was, what's the existing cost of a non-resident permit? Was
375. So it was $261,000 in revenue for 2019, based on the number of permits sold.
What section of the budget is it in, Peter?
It's not in the section of the budget. I'm just doing the math based on the number of permits sold times the cost of permit. Carol, you're on mute. Carol, you're muted.
Kathy, it's in my budget.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So the number of permits for non-resident parking issued were 698. I suspect we could easily sell more than that this year. But to Sylvia's point, maybe we should put an initial cap on the number sold. I don't know what that number would be, but that's something we can either decide now or maybe do a little bit more thought on that and just go ahead and set the fees for now.
Yeah, because when we had set the fees, we had done a resolution where in 2019 it was to be 375, but for 2020 we had increased that to 400. But I don't think with COVID and everything, and there were so few.
I don't know why we're
sold.
underselling. I don't know why we're underselling our beaches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The going
No, I
rate, you know.
Okay. So, I mean, one other question, our daily beach parking fee, I believe, is $25. Are we looking to increase that as well? And what is the village charging for their daily
I
fee?
think we should. I think it should be at least 35.
Yeah, I believe the village is at 55.
Really?
That's
Well,
what
we
I-
should check on that. Maybe we'll circle back on that one.
Yeah, I think that was from someone in the recovery business group when we had our meeting and
I
discussed
know
it.
that we had very limited parking last year, and we did open up Kirk Lot to paid parking, and it was 35 a day, and that didn't seem to dampen attendance at all. So again, I think we should be commensurate with the village on those fees. You know, we have lots of beautiful beaches, and I don't know why we would have our permit fees scheduled less than the villages.
East Hampton Village daily parking went up to 50.
50,
okay.
And
Thank
they are also charging to replace a permit too.
So if it's lost or destroyed, there's a fee for, what's the replacement fee?
It's going up to $250.
Well, I know coming out of the beach advisory.
These are $500. They're actually going to charge the residents this year too.
Coming out of the beach advisory committee out of the summer of 2020, one of the discussions was opening up and trying to find, making public parking on the streets of Montauk safer. The recommendation was to continue for the daily parking, and that the overall general feeling after the season was that the processes that were put in place about how to close a beach was for capacity on the beach, that there wasn't the direct correlation from the parking lots compared to the capacity of individuals on the beach.
Right.
You couldn't put that together, and that's why we started using the drones and also walking the beaches with the lifeguards then too. And I would anticipate we'll still have to do that again this summer, but I am supportive of selling non-resident beach parking permits again. I think it can be done safely, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Right. And then I guess the last one is the fee for beach driving permits. I think that's way too low as well.
Yeah.
So we should consider raising that. I think it's currently listed as $275 for the season.
Right, and it was supposed to be 300 for 2020.
Yeah, I think it should be, honestly, closer to 400 for the non-resident. Any comment or any suggestions on that? You gonna leave it up to me?
No.
I just, it would have been helpful to have thought this through before.
We don't have to decide right now, Kathy.
Yeah.
And if you all want to think about it for a little while, and we can reconvene. It's just good. The problem is it's going to be another, it's going to be March then.
Yeah.
No, I think we should probably try to move on the beach parking permits as soon as possible. I know my office is getting a lot of those questions, concerns right now. Settle that through. But I'm pretty comfortable raising the amount. Again, does that decrease some people's desire to come to the beach? No, but the thing is, the cost of our beaches are such a large part about the budget. To find non-taxable revenue to pay for that and take away from, so that the taxpayers don't have to bear the burden of the non-residents. I think that's important. We have the lifeguards, we have the beach raking, we have the cleanliness of the bathrooms. All of that was dramatically increased during COVID right now, and people still kept coming here. So
yeah, and some will continue. Some of those costs will continue this year.
They will continue. Yeah.
So are you asking to split it out, David? Just go ahead and raise the beach parking? right now, if we want to consider the beach driving at another time or a little bit later, or can we?
I think waiting on the beach driving is fine, but I agree with David. I think we need to get our beach parking permit fee set, and
So I'll ask, so David, in your beach committee, did they talk about beach driving at all?
No, I'm so sorry, Sylvia. It's been a while. I can go back and talk to them again. But it was mostly the discussions were about our lifeguarded beaches and then some of the back bays. So beach driving was not that major of a discussion in that committee. But I'll go back and I'll alert the committee again and circle back to them all.
And I'll tell you, I do have requests for them.
Already, that's what I'm concerned about.
I think we only what did we sell last year, Carol? Not many.
Yeah, 71 or 2, I think, as I recall. It was the low 70s.
But then
we talking drive on or parking?
Drive on.
Drive on, we shut it off too early. We only did 26 last year, but normally we do about 125 to 130 a year.
And so the suggestion from the supervisor is to go to 400?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes.
That's my suggestion, but.
I'm okay with that suggestion.
I mean, I would even consider a little higher at 450, but.
That's a pretty big jump now from 275. So, and there are some folks who really just come.
Well, it should have been 300. It should have been
true.
2020 numbers, which we didn't really sell. So we're going from 3. I'm just going to throw it out there as we start to look for revenue and unburdening local taxpayers.
My phone is already buzzing.
What, saying sell the tickets, sell the permits?
No, in support of the fee.
Okay, all right, so $500 for non-resident parking, $400 for non-resident beach driving, and $50 a day for non-resident.
Yeah, not everybody will be happy with that, but we kind of have to do what we have to do.
Okay, all right, I'm on board.
Everybody else good with that for now? And then we can revisit the other issues about when and whether or not we limit the number.
Okay.
Unless you want to talk about that and decide that now. Now, obviously, you could change it and issue more later if you really wanted to, and we felt that was appropriate.
I'd like to see the family permits go on next because I have a great deal of people interested in that, and that's always our highest number. So to consider.
What's our current fee for the additional
$100? Isn't it?
It's $100 for a family member.
Yeah, and I think.
Okay, so that's just clarify what that means. It's somebody whose parents might be here, and it's a son or daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And
their car isn't registered here.
What other?
Coming to stay for the summer.
Is it only a son and daughter, or can it be an aunt, an uncle, a niece, a nephew?
A relationship by blood.
A relationship by blood.
And they have to prove that through birth certificates or marriage certificates.
You do a blood test.
I'm not going that far, sorry. But I do require all the documentation.
And how many of those do you sell a year?
More.
In 2019, there was 608 of them. Last year, there was 206 of them.
And that's because that was before we shut it off. And we actually increased the rate on that in 2019 for 2020 from 75 to 100, I believe.
And it wasn't all because we shut it off, because we did open to family members afterwards. That was the one group that we did open.
We opened up, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest going to 150 on those.
I believe, David, it went from 75 in 2019 to 85 in 2020, according to the resolution.
Okay, I apologize. Thank you.
Now, is this a classification, the village, they don't have this classification, family permits?
No.
We actually did a second resolution though. And,
we did?
Yeah, that
it was definitely 100.
To 100, yeah.
Okay.
In June of 2020, we upped it again.
I'm going to recommend 150.
Just before they opened up.
Or
so it's
we go higher or lower, let me know.
So it's now 100?
It's 100 right now.
Okay.
Okay, 150. Okay, I'm in favor.
All right, I'll go up to 150.
Jeff, your thoughts?
I'm okay with that. I'll go with 150.
Okay. Very good. I appreciate that input very much. And John, if you can prepare a resolution for that, we could conceivably get it on for Thursday.
Sure.
Yep, can you just go over those numbers again, what we just made?
So 500 for non-resident beach parking, 400 for non-resident beach driving, 150 for family permit,
Okay. And $50 for daily parking.
$50 daily parking. Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, then can I just ask you, you still have two categories in there that we haven't discussed. Whether they get discussed now or not doesn't matter to me, but I want to know, am I limiting numbers to start with?
Number,
The number of permits for each
Number of
category
permits.
or altogether?
I don't, based on, again, about the correlation between what the parking was and the capacity of the beaches, that's not how we closed the beaches or we designed it. We actually stopped the beaches based on the spacing elements.
So here's another thing to consider. You know, we had been selling a certain number for a number of years, and so the impacts pre-COVID are kind of known. I'd be a little concerned that if about selling too many non-resident permits out of the gate. So perhaps we should consider it limiting it to a total number somewhat close to where we sold annually. And I believe you said, Carolyn, the normal average was around 700.
For family.
For family.
700 for family. So do we want to say 800 for family, 800 for non-resident beach parking? Because those numbers are pretty similar between non-resident beach parking and family permits.
So cap the whole thing at 800 between both.
Mm-hmm. That would be my
Both or total each.
Each one is at 800.
Each one's at 800. Okay.
Is that what I heard, Carol? Each category is at 800.
Actually, each category is a little less than 700 from 2019.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we could.
So you're going 14 down to 18. Yeah.
And if we found that it really wasn't a problem, we could revisit this again.
Right. I wouldn't want to go too high if you're going to end up adding the co-ops and the hotel motels back in.
Yeah, because that's going to be added.
Right.
Right. Any other comments on that cap number?
Nope. So cap is at 800 each.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, got it.
800. No. Both categories together.
Total.
I'm sorry, you got me confused there, Carol. Yeah. We had, I thought you said that each category had in the past been sold total something close to 700.
That's right. But if we want these numbers to be less, why would we increase?
No, I don't. My point was to keep them somewhat, they could go up a little bit, but not too much more than what we've historically sold. So I think you sold 690. Oh, where is it?
698 non-resident.
Okay. So, if we make a cap of non-residents at 800, it's somewhat close. It's not going to overwhelm where we historically have been in terms of parking.
So it's an increase of 200 that you're.
No, it's 102.
102.
102 more than was sold in 2019.
Okay.
If you keep it at 800. Now the family, you sold 608. And if we keep that at 800,
Well, normally I sell 2,000 permits a year between the four categories.
Okay. Well,
I order 2,500 permits every year, and only one year in my 33 years did we need more.
So Carol, I know this is are you ready? Are you ready to accept these permit applications? We have the permit.
She's already been receiving requests.
Okay.
They've been coming in and getting sent back to people.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I probably had at least 40 emails today.
Yeah. So I think this is something we need to try again, John, if you can put together a resolution for Thursday so Carol can start issuing perhaps as early as Friday.
Oh, okay. So are we doing anything with the co-ops or not? We're leaving that out, right?
So co-ops, Carol sold 103 and 19.
Yes.
Hotel motel, 542. So, I think I would cap those fairly tight to where they were in 2019. Any ideas on that?
No, I would do that. I think you can cap the number that's sold.
So say 600 for hotel motel and 125 for co-ops.
Are we keeping the last rate I saw for the co-ops was, I think, I had $85, I think, last year? The last time we did it? That's all right, Carol?
We didn't go up to 100 on that?
I'll look. I didn't see one for co-ops going up, but I'll double check. We're gonna keep it the same, or we're gonna raise that?
I think we should raise everything, honestly.
It used to be the same as family.
Oh, it did go to 100. I'm sorry, just on that reso. Okay, so
Normally had been the same as a family.
Just for consistency's sake, 150 for co-ops. And what were hotel motels?
I believe they were the 102, weren't they, or 125?
That's the co-ops. Let me see what the other ones are. Not non-resident. Let's see. I'm not seeing that one. I'll have to search that out.
Oh, wait a minute, I'll ask in the office.
Okay.
I'm sure it was stayed at the same 100.
100. Okay.
We were gonna go up a lot more and then it went back. Work off the $100 because I'm sure that's what it was.
Okay.
Is the board okay with going to 150 and 150 for co-ops?
Yeah, I think Kathy had actually, in one of her analysis in 2019, I think you had even thought about going a little higher. Am I correct, Kathy? And remember,
we got a lot of pushback, and we didn't go that route. Particularly because we were doing it in the year where folks didn't have an opportunity to plan for it.
This is pretty early in, so.
yeah, I mean, I have had one request just to know when we're going to do it and if we're going to allow motels to even participate this year. So I'm assuming by doing this, we think that's going to happen.
I think there'll be plenty of interest. I'm not concerned about.
I've had at least 10.
So motels going to.
So their motels are currently at what rate? Did we decide 100? Was it 100?
150, what we just talked about.
Going from 100 to 150?
Yes.
Same as a family? Same as family and co-op?
It would be really consistent that way. Family, co-op, and hotel all the same.
What are you thinking, Carol?
I'm not a decider here.
I'm just reading your.
I like my job. Thank you very much.
I was reading your body language. I was just trying to get.
Well, I mean, it just, to me, it doesn't compare, but.
Family versus for-profit.
Motel.
And I hear it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really had an opportunity to engage those businesses. Maybe we should hold off on the hotel motel for another discussion in March. I don't know.
I think that'd probably be best also, at least talk to, the Montauk Chamber,
So we're.
They've had a tough run already then too, but they might be rebounding.
Well, as we found out in business recovery, and I reported, some of the reservations have jumped to 400% over what they were last year already. I mean, we know that people aren't going to be traveling to Europe or South America, or maybe even to, visit their kids across the country. So, their reservations are up. People are going to be here. So I think it's how we, that.
There's going to be a lot of demand for our resources this year. I think it's going to be like when Prohibition was lifted.
I see the co-ops.
We're going to drink in our beaches.
And I don't mean regarding the alcohol use. I just think there's so much pent-up energy to get out and do things, and the beach is a safe, relatively safe way to enjoy oneself. So I think there's going to be continued high demand for use of our beaches, which will mean that we're going to have high demand for resources to keep it all going. And we saw, a dramatic increase of resources being brought to bear because of the pandemic, and heightened cleaning protocols and beach monitors and more lifeguards and whatnot. So we need to be able to do that. And, it's probably the right thing to do to have, a higher rate for hotels than for families. So
some of the
I think co-ops, I think, are more comparable to families than.
I can't hear you, Jen.
And that's why they're the same. They are the same.
Yeah, but I'm saying it's the same permit. You mean, yeah, because they're really essentially a family. It's one unit, for a family. So there is a reason to make hotels pay more because they have higher turnover, more guests.
I think I want to give an opportunity for, those business owners to have discussions with us, and maybe that is a topic of discussion with the next business recovery meeting, Sylvia, and get comments from the chamber and those folks. I mean, nobody wants to see their fees go up, but I just want to hear,
Well, there were a lot of complaints, as David knows, from the Montauk CAC, and now from his beach committee, working with both of those organizations, particularly with the containers that were left on the beach after fires, and the pickup that was necessary. There were sometimes the folks would go down and find these things, still hot and not taken care of. Some of this is done by the motels themselves, and they need to monitor it as well. We were picking up as a town, picking up the leftovers, and there's that one famous photo of maybe 50 of those containers, containers in the back of the pickup truck or the flatbed truck that he had. And, that's just not good for the town. It's not good for our resources. It's not good for people that patronize our beaches. It's really something that we, again, and I've done beach cleanups where it looks as though people just walked away from the beach camp, beach fire, and left everything there. Kids' wrappers I'm saying it's kids, they were wrappers from juice boxes and everything else. They just walk away.
Well, I think a lot of this right now, I don't want anyone to misconstrue this as just a money grab on the beach parking permits. To have another part-time staffing, if we wanted to have an early morning beach cleanup, that's another $30,000 or $40,000 a year. To our bathrooms this year cost us over another $100,000 this year, which we're going to have to continue. These are very large numbers out of an operating budget, that we need to see if we can balance it appropriately between not making sure the taxpayers are going to be charged for all this, but making sure that the visitors, can potentially pay into this non-taxable revenue. So it's a balance to make sure that we provide the high service of our beaches for public safety and cleanliness that people come here for. So
for visitors,
that's how I'm looking at it.
Alike. I mean, that's
couldn't agree more. So
well said, David.
Yep. Okay, so we'll
hold off on the motel rate until you folks can bring that back to the business recovery group. But everything else, it sounds like we're good on.
Some of it. So I think we'll move forward with this. And I'm trying to start the business. We do have a business committee, but some of them are overlapping into business recovery. But it's really a different group of folks for the most part. I know Paul Monte's on both. I know there are a couple of other folks that have been on both that I'm not thinking of their names.
I think honestly, Sylvia, at this point, we might want to consider even merging the two committees going forward.
Okay.
And looking at that, but I mean, we've had a very effective and well-working group with the business recovery, and they really do represent a pretty broad diversity of businesses within the town. So we probably can consolidate the two at this point in the near future.
Okay.
Can I just say one more thing?
Sure, Carol.
Motels were $100. Why I doubt myself, I don't know, but they were $100. And the only other difference is, if you remember in the last legislation, co-ops now, those permits are not floater permits. The only people that get a floater permit would be the hotels and motels.
Right.
The co-ops go directly on the person's vehicle.
Okay.
Okay. Good to know.
Yep.
Carol, thank you for that. Any other discussion on this topic before we move on to liaison reports?
No.
Okay, thanks very much. Michael, do we have any other callers on the line at this point?
No, we do not.
Okay, we'll move on to liaison reports. Kathy?
Sure. So Human Services continues to deliver, well-balanced, nutritious frozen meals to our seniors. If anyone is interested in, being part of that program, they should reach out to Human Services at 631-329-6939. Last Thursday, the supervisor and I had the privilege of going to the ribbon cutting for the Little Free Food Pantry that's located at on Springs Fireplace Road at the Senior Center in the far back right corner. This is a movement that builds on a program where, no one in the community should really go hungry. It's a way for folks to share and care for each other during these tough times. And if you'd like to be a volunteer to be a part of the circle of pantry caretakers, you should reach out to the Neopolitical Cowgirls. If you go to their website, there's more information. And, we look forward to that being a success. Tonight, the OLA and the East Hampton Town Police Department are doing a joint informational Zoom meeting for in Spanish for parents of young people, adolescents, middle school, high school. The topics that Sergeant Alversa, our school resource officer, is going to cover is electronic smoking devices, clothing brands designed with stash pockets, clothing brands that reference drug use, the Good Samaritan Law, East Hampton Town Anonymous Tips Hotline, and East Hampton Drug Take-Back locations. This has been promoted on OLA's Facebook page. It's going to be a 30-minute presentation and then about 15 minutes or so of Q&A. And one of the things that we really want to drive home is that young people and their families need to know that they shouldn't be afraid to call 911 if someone has overdosed or has alcohol poisoning, because New York State has a 911 Good Samaritan law that provides protections from criminal charge and prosecution if a call is placed, and that covers the victim and those that are there. Then next month, Sergeant Alversa is going to be conducting Narcan training in Spanish, and again, that's coordinated through OLA. I'm going to have two resolutions on for Thursday. One is for designating the East Hampton Volunteer Ocean Rescue and Auxiliary Squad as an emergency rescue and first aid squad. This is something we had done a memorializing resolution on in the summer, but we've worked with our council, Vince Toomey's office, so we're ready to move this forward. And this is going to allow the members of the Volunteer Ocean Rescue to display a green light on their personal vehicles when they're engaged in an emergency operation. I'm also going to have a resolution on to create and appoint the Springs Park Committee. This is something I believe I talked about at our first meeting in February. So the resolution will create that committee, and basically the committee is going to advise the town on ways to improve safety at the park. I've currently 10 members have volunteered to participate, and once we get that established, we'll set up a meeting date, and we'll be working with Scott Wilson in Land Acquisition and Management to address any of the issues and concerns we have there. Last week I had brought up that we were looking to see if we could do a one-way on Parsons Place. I'm holding off on that because now that spring school is, back in session full time, and that the kids can't be dropped off early because of social distancing and whatnot, and they can't exactly run around the fields and the playground with snow on the ground and all of this, now it's mud. There's been an issue there's been a backup with the car drop-off line, and particularly because more parents too are driving their kids rather than putting them on the school bus. So PD has gotten involved. The school's closed this week for winter break. They're going to be monitoring it when school is back in session. So we're just going to hold off until that kind of resolves itself. Earlier this month, I had sent a letter on behalf of the Spring CAC. If you remember, we had done a resolution about the parking fee on town residents, in the village. I got a response back from the village administrator that they are going to, the first 2 hours for town residents will be free. They're looking to make a simple amendment to their existing intermunicipal agreement so that town residents can be included in this proposal. And Peter, it says that the agreement is currently being drafted and will be sent over to the supervisor and the town board for review at the end of the month. So we look forward to hearing back from the village on that. Police reform and reinvention survey. We have, so we had a cutoff date of this past weekend. We have received 1,182 completed surveys, which is tremendous. We're excited about that. We're going to be sending that information over to the committee that's drafting the plan, and also to Paul Tepes, who we hired as our consultant to review that. So that's, we have another meeting of the Police Reform and Reinvention Committee on Monday, and we should be discussing, the results at that meeting. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention that last week, David Buddha was on and asked about town board work session materials being placed on the town website. We now have a home for them on the town website. If you go to government, click on town board, it'll be town board work session materials, or you can go to how do I, look at find, and it'll be town board work session materials. So the work session materials have been posted for last week's work session. This week's work session, we weren't sent any materials in advance for the topics that we discussed today. So I don't have materials at this point to post for this week, but it was with the holiday yesterday, it was, challenging. Some things, were said to us last minute, or were just, didn't have a memo, didn't have a presentation. It was just, for instance, like the BOEM draft EIS, we weren't sent materials, nor were we sent materials for the Administrative Bureau. It was more a dialogue discussion, so that we don't have anything to place in that folder. But I just wanted to let folks know that we have created that home for the materials, and we will work towards having things posted at, as early as possible so community members can see what the board will be discussing.
Kathy, thank you so much for following up on that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I think it's, and, Ann Bell in your office, myself and Gabriella and David's in my office, we have all volunteered to be, the point person to IT so that we can get materials posted, in an expeditious manner. So, and that's what I have for today. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Kathy. David, you're on mute.
Just adding what Kathy was saying there about getting information out to the public. I've also reached out to Jason Nauer from LTV, and two things that LTV is going to be doing, well, potentially doing. One of them is actually along our scroll bar, just to put the information, the title of what the actual work session agenda item is that we'll be discussing. I know they do that very well during our public hearings, so they're looking to that. And one option I'll send around to the board is potentially adding a QR code to the screen of the site that an individual can maybe click or flash on, and it'll direct them directly to the town board's website. You're seeing that at a lot of other programming around, and I'll send that off to the board. But I want to thank Jason for just having a discussion with me and LTV for all their work they're doing and making me look so good today. Let's see here. That was a joke. You'll laugh at yourself. Okay, so we had a meeting for the Nature Preserve Committee last week. It was a great meeting that they actually ended up doing a socially distanced hike to some of the areas that they wanted to discuss about rerouting some of the trails to add some connectivity to areas and trails that sort of dead end or go along private property. I think Rick Whalen, the chair of that committee, sent that information to the town board. And please just review, and we'll have maybe a little bit of a greater discussion later. As far as the town board and some of the work that's been done on the trails, from land management and acquisition, we've received authorization from the state to do the tar works at the Hills project. So we'll be scheduling that in the upcoming timeframe. The Montauk CEC is aware of that, and that's just to make that area of the tar works, bring it back to some native grasslands. We also discussed with Tom Dess from the New York State about the restoration of the Montauk Landfill Trailhead. It's a very popular trailhead where there's a kiosk and a lot of individuals park there to use the trails or the bike on the trails. So we're looking to just adjust that and clear it out a little bit to make it more uniform to some of our other trailheads. They're continuing preserve monitoring, southern pine beetle inspections. If anyone needs any inspections, please contact land management. We're continuing to remove unauthorized hunting stands on some of the properties. Land management also did some work at the Pussy's Pond Preserve, removing remnant fencing posts, some non-native plantings, and limbed up some of the trees for some better view sight lines that was discussed with some of the members of Springs Ecobonic Protection Committee. Let's see here, just to move on to other things. Let me just get to my agenda. The Nature Preserve Committee discussed some code changes that they would like to continue moving forward about nature preserves. I know we did have that at a town board meeting about a year and a half ago. So we're going to look forward to bring that discussion back to the town board to re-enlighten us and see how we can move that forward. A lot of the discussion was about trailheads, trying to get the trailheads to be a little bit more similar in quality to each other, ones that might be able to work within water quality projects also that might be in Montauk or other areas of Northwest. And then again, just looking at some of the Montauk schematics. Again, a lot of discussion went on to cutting a couple of new trails that would become connectivity, and we can please go through those. Also, the management plans that were discussed, the 555 management plan, where we're looking for another different name from the 555, is pretty much almost complete right now. Please be ready to see that coming forward from the Nature Preserve Committee. I will also have resolutions on for this week for the passing of for the Maloney property, Springs Fireplace Road, the management plan that we heard on January 21st, and also Hook Pond Cove, also Ayer, that's 81 Ocean Ave, that's in the village of East Hampton. Both these projects, transcripts went up in a lot of amount of time. If you have any comments, please let me know. But both of these projects specifically will have actions after those approvals for native, for vegetation restoration projects upcoming then too. Let me see here. Moving on to, I sat in on the Water Quality Technical Advisory Committee's meeting, and let me just grab my notes from that if you don't mind. I can't pull up my notes, but the major discussions on there were primarily about the triggers for potential septic upgrades, making some changes to the code for those, specifically changing the area of substantial expansion of a house. Does that trigger a septic upgrade? Does a transfer transfer a septic upgrade? So they're working through some of the processes on that and the pros and cons, and they'll be discussing that with the board also. Let me just sort of get to my next meeting now. They've also are going to be drafting and sending a recommendation to the town board to reassess the water protection districts and propose modifications. They want to switch. They discussed the idea of expansion of the water protection districts to broaden the area further than the 0 to 2 years for groundwater transport. They're recommending to expand the water protection districts to include a 0 to 10-year travel time. There were new county watershed sewer plans that were released in July of 2020, so they're using those plans, looking at what the town has right now. So they actually had a vote, and primarily that's going to be coming our way to extend it from 0 to 10 years from the 0 to 2 that we currently look for the water protection district. And once we get that, maybe we'll have Chris Clapp and Melissa Winslow in to discuss that. Again, the Water Quality Technical Advisory Committee is accepting RFA projects. We discussed some of the projects are upcoming, particularly from the Village of East Hampton on their dredging project. And they also did discuss a little bit about the Camp Haro sanitary systems that are out there for potential funding and what that might mean. So there was a start to that discussion also. In recreation, we've received an application for a field use permit for a low to moderate risk sport. Before I send that to the board, we'll send that over to Dr. Polsky for his review of the guidance or of the protocols that they're going to set in place. But please be aware that we're getting closer to that March and April timeframe where some of our sports might be happening, even Little League if they do also too, which I believe they're signing up for also. We had a life tenancy at a property at 958 Springs Fireplace Road recently. Unfortunately, the lady that was in that house has passed away some months ago. And the town now is in complete control of the property, and which has a structure on it. We're going to look in that structure. If that structure can be repurposed any which way or donated, and I'll do a site visit of that property and let the board know any recommendations maybe moving forward. But that property is finally closed. Also, I just received while I was on the the Zoom call today with everyone, a proposal for engineering design services from LK McLean. This will be for the Montauk Skate Park. I will review this, circulate this, but it's all within about what we were anticipating for that. And if the board is comfortable, I might even put it on for resolution for acceptance for this Thursday too. That's all I have currently, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Sylvia?
Thanks, Peter. So the Business Recovery Group met on Wednesday of last week, and they, as you know, Robert Ross is an administrator at the hospital, and he always gives us an update on numbers. So Southampton Hospital, as of 2/11, had 19 COVID patients. It's the first time they've been in the teens in many months, and so they were happy to see that. 6 are in ICU. Eastern Long Island, which is in Greenport, has 3 COVID patients. 1 is in ICU. Stony Brook has 156 patients and 60 are in ICU. So Stony Brook, we're still seeing pretty high levels. 2 week before that, it was 158. So they only dropped by 2 numbers of COVID folks in the hospital and Stony Brook. The committee discussed the beach parking permits, which we had on the agenda today, and the non-resident, and they'd also like to, see if the hotels, can we move forward with, talking about hotels as well. Outdoor dining was also on the agenda. Last season, we had a program that was actually set up by the state that allowed outdoor dining on our sidewalks that were in the right of way, particularly in Montauk and in Amagansett. that program has expired. So at this time, we don't have, and there was also a program with the SLA at that time to allow alcohol if the businesses applied for it during the emergency from last summer. So that program is also expired. So we don't have those programs to look at unless the governor wants to move forward with doing the same thing this season. Otherwise, then the businesses have to be in contact with the state to lease part of that right of way for their own businesses. And I don't know how the SLA at this time is going to respond. I'm assuming the same way, that they still have to get a license to be able to serve at a leased property. So we're going to keep moving forward, but at this time, those are some of the answers for those guys that would, and I do think that the sidewalk dining was successful, and it was what people would like to see and what people kind of think of when they think of a resort community like ours. So I think we'd like to move forward with trying to work in getting, the sidewalk dining available again for this summer and beyond. They also discussed briefly, and let me just go back. So John, do we have the transcripts for the pilot program that the town did? We had the hearing on December the 3rd.
Transcripts have been up for a while.
Okay, I couldn't find them. John didn't seem to see them this morning, so.
I didn't have a chance to look for them. I just had asked Ann if she had known if they were up, but I haven't had a chance to go look.
So, you know when they were put up, David?
I will find out for you.
Thank you.
They were put up some time ago.
Yeah, but the hearing was December 3rd. So if that has been
I think they were put up on the 17th.
Of January?
No, of December.
Then, John, can we go ahead and have a
resolution?
Resolution for those.
Okay.
Thank you. So this pilot program, just as a reminder, is for businesses that already have space that they can move more people out into that space for outdoor dining. And the other issue that's come up is the events and catering for the summer of 2021. And thank the supervisor for sending out the letter that is, that basically says we need more guidance before we can do anything from, we need the guidance not only from the state, but from the county as well. So we'll, just keep moving forward with that one as we get information. And the Anti-Bias Task Force also met this past week. This is Black History Month. The Diversity Show had their last show. It should be, if we did have a social media post with the link to YouTube so you could see it. And it was also being shown on LTV at different times. You can find the times if you go to the LTV website. And that was with the food pantry folks. So it was very successful. Louise Bergerson was the moderator, and we had 3 of the food pantries at the call. It was a Zoom call, or a Zoom program platform. The next diversity show for Black History Month will be Michael Butler, who is associated with the historical house in Sag Harbor, and is also an artist. And so he's going to be interviewed by Susan Wilmer and Louise Bergerson. And then we'd like to move on to the In Plain Sight. I don't have a confirmation yet from David Rattray or Donna Marie Barnes, but we'd like to do this as a follow-up show, either at the end of this month or the beginning of March. And we also discussed the Police Reform Committee and made sure that people sent out emails to everyone. So Kathy, what was the final number of surveys that you got?
1,182.
That's great. That's really great.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
So, and just as a reminder that every community that has a police chief is having this same type of discussion, so that Chief Mike Tracy of the village is having a police reform discussion, as well as the village of Sag Harbor. So villages separately are involved in their own discussion, as well as the town of East Hampton. We're updating our brochure. And so this is going to be not a slow process, but it is a process that we're moving forward, making sure that resources, we have all the information that we can give people for resources when needed for anything to do with the Anti-Bias Task Force. The Community Housing Opportunity Fund also met. The discussion, there was a long discussion about types of affordable housing that would be appropriate for East Hampton. Condos was a new concept for affordable housing, but we also talked about what is considered co-housing, which is smaller homes clustered together, but they're individual homes not connected to each other. Apartments, single family homes, traditional with like a Whalebone Woods or Green Hollow. And so we're trying to wrap our head around, I think what I feel that the group landed on was small clustered single family homes would be something that we should really look at in some of the properties that we already have purchased, and see what that would look like if we wanted to work towards that as our next type of affordable housing. We also discussed the transfer tax for affordable housing. As you may know, Fred Thiel reintroduced that legislation, and so it's moving its way slowly through the state legislature. And Tom Rule also gave us a brief report on the fund itself, with really a brief view of how it's being used or been used in this last year, and the budget over the past year. Last week, we saw a PowerPoint presentation from Director Joanne Powell about the Wainscott Hamlet study. And going through that, I think we need to edit that down. There were some slides that need to be taken out. There were some conversation and comments that need to be from the town board that, we landed on something that we want to make sure that we're doing the overlay districts and not doing the form code type of structure. And I'd like to start then with a list of priorities, how we would like to prioritize the Wainscott Hamlet plan, and also have a list of things that we could work on now, such as the zone change for a limited business overlay district that was at the very beginning of the Hamlet. So part of this is whether or not the town board would like to work through some of this as a committee, if we want to put a committee together, or if we wanted to try to incorporate a Zoom meeting with the whole community. And I'm not sure how we would advertise that so people would be able to participate. But those are two ways. I've already had a couple of requests from folks in Wainscott that would like to be on a committee. So, we can go in that direction. We can also ask if we think that in going through some of this, we need to have a consultant to help direct, as we did with getting to this part. So I would like to ask the town board what they think their preference is in moving forward, or if we want to do a mix of both of those things, to have a committee, but and then also put together a committee for Wainscott folks, and then also perhaps have community-wide, as much as we can get it out there, Zoom meetings to discuss any issues that come up once we set our priorities. Is there?
Board members?
Has the Wainscott CAC, I know that they have, I believe they've got a Hamlet study subcommittee. Have they taken a look into this? Do they have a recommendation?
So no, they haven't seen the PowerPoint yet.
Okay.
So I'm waiting for my next meeting to have the PowerPoint. And again, the Wainscott CAC is 10 members. So, I think putting the burden on the Wainscott CAC is not really out there with the community. Now, they can help with communication, but it's really, I think I'd like to have a broader look and a broader scope of what's going on in Wainscott than just 10 members from the Wainscott CAC. So, you know, yes, I will certainly, you know, make sure that they are involved in this. And, you know, they knew the time to look in. I know Carolyn Gluck is the chair. She's already contacted me. So they're very well aware that at least these 10 members are very well aware of the Wainscott study, Hamlet study, but moving it forward, I think we need a much broader brush.
Yeah, because you have to also just extend directly out to the property owners themselves then too.
Yeah.
You know?
So
I think you're going to find it helpful if you start with the CAC. They're very active. They're very knowledgeable. They're all long-term, members of that board, and I found them to be, particularly helpful and on their game in planning. And you might find that if you sit down with a smaller group of them, that they can help sharpen the focus pretty quickly. I wouldn't immediately go into a larger committee. I would use them first because they're energetic and they're pretty observant about it. I think they can be helpful in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, when we did the original Hamlet studies and had them at, the meetings open at LTV, there was a much greater diversity of folks that showed up to that. It wasn't just a very small group. In fact, I'm trying to remember how many folks showed up from the Wainscott CAC in that, when we did those meetings. But I would, as I said, I certainly think the Wainscott CAC is involved. All of their members are involved, but I just would like to have a broader brushstroke.
To Sylvia's point, I think there was only like one business owner in all of Wainscott involved with the CAC, local business owner, and that business district has dozens of business owners, and
yeah,
they're the ones that are they're the primary stakeholders here, and if we don't have direct outreach to them, that's going to be a mistake. So I think it's a good idea to contact the business owners, the direct stakeholders, and have the conversation with them as well. Include them in that conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, and maybe you look at the different organizations within Wainscott, like, the folks at the chapel, the folks, as Peter said, in the business district, the folks, there's now a Wainscott United group. I mean, there's probably, folks from the airport, and put together, including, a representative of the Wainscott CAC or two, might make more sense. All the
Even
different,
a member from the school.
someone from the school, like have like a real stakeholders group.
Yeah. And I'm going to go back to the airport since we just mentioned it and ask Jeff. This was in our CAC, in the CAC meeting. They were asking when there might be a committee for the airport, and I don't know if because they don't feel that AMAC is representing them in any way. So is there a thought process of that I can go back to the Wainscott CAC and talk about, folks that you might be looking for, or that we can all decide should be on an airport committee, or would you like to expand? You were on that call, Jeff, so you recall what was being said that couple Saturdays ago.
Yeah, I do. I think we got to talk in exec. This touches on an issue of contracts with the airport, and I think we have to discuss.
Jeff, I'm having trouble with your audio again.
I don't know what it is with the audio.
Just a little closer to the mic, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
That's much better.
I think that this touches on a contract issue that we have to discuss in exec, an airport contract issue that exists in exec first. So I think we have to have that discussion among the town board. We had talked, I think, in work sessions generally about, having some kind of a committee in that airport revisioning process. But I think we should first look at we have a contract issue to discuss. I think that's what would come up.
How about adding folks to AMAC?
AMAC, as you pointed out, AMAC is a somewhat balanced committee, so we have, it's tricky to add people, but I'm not sure that AMAC is really the group to be the basis for airport reimagining. It doesn't seem like they're on that same page exactly.
Well, I don't know that this, if you recall, I don't think they were talking about reimagining. I think they were just talking about representation.
I think it was in connection with the reimagining process. That's what they were. The focus was, can we have a committee of stakeholders that'll be participating
right. Well,
in that re-envisioning process?
But there was also a parsing of that so that they didn't feel that AMAC was representing them as well, and that they meet once a month and they sort of felt like they've been left out.
Yeah, well, they're not representing AMAC. They're clearly not. That's not, that hasn't been the purpose of AMAC. I'm just not sure that expanding AMAC is the answer. I think it might be, a more pointed, focused discussion on, what kind of committee input do we want in the revisioning process? And we got to make up our minds fairly quickly on it because time is going by.
Yeah, and I that's something I'll just address in terms of the timing. And while September of 2021 is the time at which grant assurances expire, there's no requirement. It's not like a drop dead. Everything has to change on September. On October 1st of 2021. We'll take as much time as we need to really fully have a fair and open discussion about any future changes at the airport. And I don't think it's a drop dead rush and get it done before then.
I agree. That is the case. I've always.
I just think we need to keep telling the public that because there's this, I think, idea out there that it's all going to change overnight and
right.
I agree with that. I also think we should, be moving forward on the process and making some decisions.
Well, we can certainly discuss that more, and I'm sure we will in the coming, weeks and months. So.
So the last thing on my agenda is the emergency climate declaration. So I was hoping to have that on. I'd spoken with John or sent him the revised version, and he said it was ready to go. But I've also heard from Kathy that she would like to take a little bit more time with it. So, if that's all right, then we'll put it on definitely for the first meeting in March.
Sounds good. I think
that'd be great.
I'd like some more time.
We'll give us one more work session if there are any discussion about it. And let me get to my calendar. Sorry. So the first meeting is March the 4th. And our work session is March the 2nd.
So why don't we discuss it March 2nd? And, if it's ready to go, if everybody agrees, we'll get it on to the 4th.
That'd be great.
Right. Okay. And is the leaf blower legislation on, the public hearing, setting the public hearing, John? Is that on? You're on mute. Sorry.
I'm getting John a T-shirt that says, John, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's already T-shirts available.
Yeah.
I did do a draft. I don't know if I submitted or not, so I'll double check, make sure it goes on.
Okay.
We're going to have the hearing on the 4th, I think we said, right?
Right. We just.
Yeah.
Okay. So just make sure that that's on for Thursday to schedule.
It's in there. Yep.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Sure.
So is that it for you, Sylvia?
That is, yes. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Jeff, you have a liaison report for us?
Yeah, I have a relatively short liaison report since we weren't meeting last week. The AMAC committee, speaking of the AMAC committee, is actually making progress on some draft minimum standards, and I think we're going to be discussing them on Friday. This has been a project that's been ongoing for a long time. We haven't really even looked at our airport minimum standards for fixed-based operators for years. And they were eager to compare our operations to other airports that are comparable, spent a long time figuring out which ones were, and I think now are on the way, and so that will probably be a topic coming up on Friday. Interestingly, and I don't really know what this portends for our airport, but there's quite a bit of buzz, you'll excuse the expression, about electric planes new versions of electric planes coming in that could become commuter aircraft. And apparently, recently, like within the last few days, Boeing has made a huge investment in this aircraft that are they're designed to be urban vertical takeoff aircraft. So they theoretically could fly from urban spaces outward. They're right now limited to a 60-mile range. So from the city of New York, they're talking about the possibility of using this kind of aircraft to get into the larger airports, LaGuardia and JFK. And time will tell. I mean, there's a lot of enthusiasm about it. I've seen photos of the planes, and I guess like with cars, electric aircraft are in the future. I doubt that it's going to have any impact on our decision making or our future. And maybe at some point, way beyond, I think, the date that we make a decision on our airport, maybe someone will have some ideas about introducing that kind of transportation. But it's pretty high tech. They can lift off and take off the way a helicopter would, and then fly. So we already have fossil fuel aircraft like that, but they're obviously much heavier. They're really war airplanes. But it's an interesting glimpse into the future, I think. On LTV, we've been in discussion with Len Bernard and Jameson, working on a new contract and sort of catching up with getting a new contract for LTV. We've been paying them, as we've allocated money from our budgets over the years. But we had an old contract that expired, and so we're actually going to go into exec session and look at it. I don't want to talk about the terms that we're looking at. It's substantially the same as what we've had. I think we've gotten pretty good performance out of LTV. I don't want to discuss the individual, sections of the contract, but so we have a draft contract, and we'll be going into exec session on that, and I expect that we'll have a new contract quite shortly, and we'll put it on for resolution. I'm hoping.
You have that for us today, Jeff?
Yeah, it is. It's around today. On Camp Hero, I've been, pursuing discussions with Kim Shaw, and I was aware that the Water Quality Technical Advisory Committee met and had some preliminary discussions. Carol was kind enough to dig through the archives and pull out some of the historic documentation on the formation of that district, which I have actually just got, and we'll be taking a look at to see if it gives us any ideas that may change the framework within which we can figure out a potential solution to the problems. And there was a mention today that we're going to get bids on the grinder pumps. That's because the initial costs came in pretty high. So I feel that there's some forward progress, but we have a lot of work to do to just kind of figure out the lay of the land on the Camp Hero district and what can be done and what can't be done. And I'll be contacting Jim Ryan, our tax attorney, for some advice on it, and we'll have to report back and circle back, hopefully in a work session with some suggestions about how to actually move forward. I also talked to Melissa when I talked to Kim, and they have some good ideas. So that's in the works.
Did you get a chance to reach back out to Lisa DeViglio? She CC'd me.
Yes, I did. She's not happy, and I reached out to her, and she's still not happy. But I'm going to send her another email today, and I'll keep her advised of what we're doing. Yeah. But yes, I did reach out to her.
Appreciate that, Joe.
Yeah. I don't think any of them are happy, and this is not a problem that's going to be easy to resolve. There's not going to be a magic wand you can wave that's going to make them happy. They have been paying somewhat high costs. I've talked to Len, and they're not. We did a little comparison of just like what a homeowner might encounter over the same period of years. It's not totally off the charts, the comparison, but there's a problem here, and I think it deserves as the board likes to say, a 30,000-foot look to see if there might be some overall solution instead of trying to sort of piecemeal fix up the system. So I'm still on it. I'll let you know when we have something more definitive, and we'll bring it in and have a serious discussion in a work session. And that's what's been occupying the time. That's all I have.
All right, thank you, Jeff. So this past Saturday, as the board knows, the town held their first vaccination session of COVID-19 vaccinations with Pfizer, being the vaccine administered at the CDCH building. We were able to give out 332 vaccination doses, and they were to a very limited audience. We managed to secure, in my discussions with the county executive and working with his staff, we were given 300 doses to be given to 1B essential workers, which included teachers, grocery store and deli workers, transportation folks, and firefighters. We did have a standing list of local firefighters who not yet been vaccinated. We were able to vaccinate most all of them. In addition, we started with teachers as well. And as I said, frontline grocery store clerks and deli workers. The county is only allowed right now by the governor to administer their vaccine supplies to that limited group. And all in all, it was an extremely successful and very positive experience for everyone involved. And there's so many people to thank who made this happen. This was no small task to pull off. As you recall in my State of the Town address, I wanted to use the CDCH building as a dedicated vaccination center. And through the efforts of the town's buildings and ground staff, Liaison David Lease, the building was turned around extremely quickly. Every single ceiling tile that was missing in that building was replaced, which was the entire ceilings, due to the mold remediation necessary when we first acquired the building. Everything was up and working. We had to get a generator in to ensure that the refrigeration for the vaccine would continue, and we had to have temperature monitors with logging and wireless reporting, and we had to get Wi-Fi and phone, everything in place so that we could receive vaccine. I got word from the county, I believe it was last Monday afternoon, that we were going to get 300 doses. So we had to put together an entire team of vaccinators, nurses, my staff here, Joanne Pilgrim and Ann Bell, did epic work to put together the lists from the fire departments and through FRES, and to reach out to our local school districts and businesses that had those eligible workers, and then to refine that list and get that to the county to be uploaded into their CDMS system. There was a lot of IT involved. Special thanks to Suffolk County IT personnel, Scott, who was there on site on Saturday to make sure everything ran smoothly. We had volunteer vaccinators. As I said, we had local doctors. Dr. Gail Schoenfeld was our medical director for this event. Dr. George Dempsey also was there to assist with consultations. We had local EMTs certified to give vaccine who were there. We had school nurses giving vaccine. We had RNs helping draw and reconstitute doses. We had a chemist. We had Connor Casera, who's a local pharmacist from Park Place, who donated his time as well on that effort. Too many people to thank. Honestly, we had Thomas Sessa, who has a medical data company that helped on the IT side, was really crucial. Sheila Rogers, East Hampton Healthcare. And again, so many folks, and thanks for Kathy and David for bringing Gabriella into the mix as well. She was really critical to help us turn this around in such a short period of time. Super successful. What a great feeling to see our local folks getting vaccinated. Everybody was so happy, those who were volunteering as well as those receiving vaccines. Special thanks to Carol Brennan, who went to on, I think it was Friday morning, you went you went to the pod in Riverhead to get trained on how the registration would go and be our chief registrar and help out all day long after working hard all week. Carol, my thanks to you. Everything ran really smoothly considering what we were up against. It was really heartwarming to see people getting vaccinated, some people just breaking down in tears, the stress of many months being washed away with their first dose of vaccine. We did have a standby. We got 300 doses, and some of the vials, actually, you can pull an extra dose if you're doing it carefully. We were able to get 32 extra doses to give out. We had a standby list, again, of teachers and frontline workers and firefighters that we called from. We would very much like to be able to do this again. This was closed enrollment. You're not able to sign up. And I ask that you please, right now, don't contact my office. Don't email me or any of the other town board members about it. It really is just going to overwhelm the system, and it's going to distract us from being able to get the next set of doses. So for now, just hang tight. We will certainly let people in the town know once there's an open enrollment system in place. For now, the vaccine supplies are extremely limited. The fact that we got 300 doses is kind of miraculous in a way. I am pursuing another avenue for doses through private sector pharmacy groups to be able to allow pharmacies to administer to those over 65. Again, the governor has designated certain groups can only vaccinate certain other groups of people. We certainly want to get anyone in town who's eligible vaccinated as soon as possible. We know we have a lot of senior citizens that are anxious to get the vaccine, and we're going to work to get that group vaccinated as soon as possible. I have no indication yet as to where that vaccine is coming from, but we're working on it every day. That is my primary focus right now. This year, from the very first day organizational meeting till now. We obviously have other work that we need to complete, but my focus is on trying to get everybody who's eligible vaccinated as soon as possible. We've had such a great outpouring. We had to take down the town's online form for volunteering. Because that system got overwhelmed with people wanting to volunteer. We're so lucky, and I'm so grateful to live in this community where so many people are willing to step forward and help. This is just the beginning. This is just the light, and that we will get beyond this. And it's really giving a number of people hope. I know that there's a lot of frustration out there. People unsure how to get vaccine. They hear others getting vaccine. My suggestion to anyone listening who's eligible is to keep trying the state sites, keep trying the local pharmacy sites. Log on, become a member of the local pharmacy, and then try getting access to vaccine, especially if you're in that over 65 category. I've spoken to a number of residents who were successful in getting vaccine that way. But until we can get a solid supply of vaccine on a regular basis, we won't be able to offer any scheduling. So, hang in there. We're working on it, doing our best to get there. I think that's pretty much on the vaccine front. The county positive totals for Sunday, February 14th, Valentine's Day, were down to 3.9% positive. So we've seen a continual decline from the highs of around 12% post-holiday season spike to today. We need to keep that positivity rate declining. So again, please continue to stay safe and socially distance, and don't gather with those outside of your household for the time being. And we're going to continue to work to get everybody vaccinated as soon as possible. Speaking of Valentine's Day, Longhouse held a Valentine's Day tribute to Jack Leonard Larson, who was the founder and owner of Longhouse. He just recently passed away. There were many celebrities and notable other folks, artists, who paid tribute to Jack in their online presentation. And they also talked about Paul Goldberger, among them, was being honored for his lifetime achievement. He received the Longhouse Award. And there was a discussion about the architecture, about the art, about Jack, what Jack's vision was, and the foundation's interest and intent to soon open up Jack's house to public tours, which is something new. The house really was never available for tours, and they did a visual presentation walkthrough of that portion of the house, and it's really spectacular. And I wish them all the luck with achieving their goal. And they were obviously seeking additional funding to keep what is really an internationally significant art and garden site. We're very fortunate to have it here in our town. And that's pretty much it for, oh, I know, one other thing I wanted to go over. Sorry, it's been a long weekend. Update on the capital budget. After last week's discussion, there were a few revisions. I think the most notable one was my suggestion that we take the $250,000 and put in the capital plan for energy and sustainability town-wide, and I'm very pleased that the board was very supportive of that idea. There's an additional $125,000 added to the ADA improvements town-wide. We do need to make some improvements in some public buildings, such as the Springs Library and the Bluff Road Marine Museum. And then there's an additional $100,000 for the Springs Library for improvements there. This brings the total for 2021 at $10,744,135, which is a reduction of principal debt compared to what we're retiring. And the same amount of debt retired for 2021 is $12,189,696. So we're staying well on our target to continue to reduce overall indebtedness and still provide necessary improvements in infrastructure going forward for the coming year.
So I just wanted to, on the budget and putting in money for the energy sustainability projects, part of what the Energy Sustainability Committee had asked for was a consultant to help perhaps with how we move forward as a town. I'm hopeful that that money can be used for that as well. I know that Len said we could borrow even more money under the sustainable energy umbrella if it's needed for the coming year. So I just wanted to bring that to the town board's attention. It may not be just for projects such as upgrading cars for electric, which we had, perhaps looked into, or HVAC upgrades, but also to look for if you recall, we had a resolution where we had, for energy sustainability, saying we would look into doing an RFP for someone to help get us to our goals. So a professional. So I just wanted to make sure that that is part of the process here.
So we have earmarked the $250,000 for the year in the capital planning, and any project going forward will, certainly review and consider the expenditure before it's made, because it's really a general fund, if you will. So specific requests for funding from that fund will require further discussion and approval, but certainly, wouldn't rule anything out that advances our energy sustainability goals at this point. So I think it's broad enough, certainly broad enough to consider that question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, before we move on to resolutions, I just want to check and see if we have any members of the public wanting to address the board. Michael?
Yes, we do. I have a caller. The last four digits are 8764. I'll unmute that caller right now.
Good afternoon again. It's David Boot. I wanted to thank Councilwoman Burke-Gonzalez for the effort, which is very much appreciated, to create the work session materials page on the town website. I had a chance to take a look at it. I appreciate that you backfilled in for last week, and looking forward. I hope that for those circumstances of matters that you discussed where there are materials prepared in advance, that they will be available in advance. I only have one positive suggestion. Currently, your town webpage has 7 buttons, shortcuts, if you will, to get to important things such as payments, online payments, stay connected, etc. And the 2 most recent buttons that were added were for transcripts and for recreation. I would respectfully suggest that you could add an 8th button if there's room for work session materials. That way, people will be more likely to become familiar with it rather than simply going through town board work session, home government, town board work session materials. A button will facilitate people learning about it, using it, and coming familiar with it. And thank you for making it available.
Thanks, David. We'll call it the Buddha button. We'll be able to get everything you need. One-stop shopping.
I like it.
That's a helpful suggestion, David. We'll look into that.
That may not be necessary, but if you do, it's 1 D and no H.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, I think I've learned how to spell your name at this point.
For better or for worse?
Mostly better, David. Pleasure to hear from you. You take care.
Bye-bye.
Anybody else on the line, Michael?
No, there are no more callers.
Okay, let's move on to resolutions then.
All right, so resolution 2021-237 is to increase the cap for the law office of Vincent Toomey, General Matters 2020. This increase shall be capped at $15,000, constituting a total of $180,000 for the calendar year 2020.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried.
Resolution 2021-238 is to pay a NYMAR deductible for Mitchell, whereas Frederick Mitchell has a claim regarding damage to her vehicle. The resolve that the town's payment will be $2,170 from one budget line and $2,122.61 from another, for a total of $4,292.61.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried.
Resolution 2021-239 is to retain stenographic services and Spanish language interpreters for the Justice Court. The steno services will be billed at $275 per diem and $100 for the transcripts for weekend and partial day arraignments. And the language interpreters will be hired at a cost of $125 for a half day, $78 per session for weekends, in an amount not to exceed $225 for a full day.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried. Resolution 240 is to amend Resolution 2020-1199, pay the notary license fee for John Jilnicki in the amount of $60.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passed and carried. Resolution 241 is fire investigation training, and that is for Bruce Scivone, authorized to attend the 2021 fire investigation training classes starting February 22nd. The total amount not to exceed $2,600. That Bruce Scivone will be reimbursed the $25 registration fee already paid upon properly submitted voucher, and that the 2021 hotel fees an amount not to exceed $1,248, and for class materials and meal, breakfast, lunch, in the amount of $165 to be paid from the appropriate training expense budget.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried. Resolution 2021-242 is to retain Honorable, I should say Howard, not Hayward, Howard A. Levine and Alan Goldberg, Esquire, from the firm of Whiteman, Osterman, Anna, LLP, as counsel in the Seaview appeal case. Those gentlemen will receive pay at a rate of $610 for the Honorable Howard A. Levine, and Alan Goldberg shall be paid at a rate of $365 an hour and other members of the firm Whiteman, Osterman, Hanna, LLP, at their approved rates for the 2021 calendar year, not to exceed $10,000 without further authorization from the town board.
Second as amended.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried. We now have an executive session.
I move we go into exec session to discuss the proposed acquisition of real property and to seek advice from counsel.
We also have contracts, T-Mobile Panago extension.
And we have contracts involving LTV.
Any other issues?
And airport contracts, actually. There's an airport contract.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, what time?
Does 2:30 work for everyone, or you want a little bit more time? 2:30 then?
5, either one.
Okay, so I'll send out a link. We'll convene in exec at 2:30. Thank you very much, everyone. Please stay safe. Hang in there. We'll make an announcement if and when we get the opportunity to give vaccine to the broader public. Hopefully that will be an announcement we can make somewhat soon. Till then, stay safe and take care.